semdol ka ke mo fa seda.
Welcome to Talking in Stations, a podcast about EVE Online. I am Matterall here with Arcia.
Hello.
And Sutonia.
Hey.
And McLeod behind the engineering desk.
Hello.
Okay, today we have a really good show for you with CCP, a segment that was recorded earlier in the week. And they talk about, you guessed it, nullification. Among other things, there's some surprises here that you'll want to see. So buckle up. We'll come back after the segment, which lasts approximately 55 minutes. And we'll analyze what they talked about, and we'll talk about nullification and some of the other things that are in this video, as well as some of the news that's been going around this week. So stay tuned after the presentation. All right. I guess. All right. Welcome to this segment of Talking in Stations, where we get to meet CCP Paradox and CCP Emerald. And you guys will recognize former Elise Randolph, now CCP Swift. So how you doing, Swift?
Oh, very good. Very good. I miss being on the show, but I am enjoying watching it. It's kind of brings a new dynamic to it. I don't know what's coming, so I can always just have an exciting watch or an exciting listen.
Right, because you weren't there making the great content. But so next to you or right above you is CCP Emerald. How are you?
Doing very well, thanks.
Good. It's nice to meet you. And
nice to meet you too.
Next to her is CCP Paradox. All right, let's see if I got this right.
How's it going?
Really good. So Paradox, you're from Team Talos.
Yeah, Team Talos and also Team Axiom. So 2 teams at CCP.
What's Axiom do?
Axiom is responsible for a lot of the ecosystem changes that you guys have been seeing over the coming months. So dynamic bounties, the encounter surveillance system, resource distribution, and most recently the ship industry changes.
Oh, wow. Well, so Talos is only part of the ecosystem changes, but Axiom is the other half of it, or the...
Yeah, so for example, Talos, we do a lot more, like one of our strategies is just rapid releasing. So just getting some smaller balance changes that are needed for ships or structures or areas of the game, and just getting those out on a much faster cadence.
I see. And Emerald, you are brand manager.
Yeah, I'm a brand manager on the publishing team.
Oh, nice. What is a brand manager on the publishing team look like? Day, your day. What's your day look like?
Well, we manage the marketing strategy for all of the updates and features that are coming live on the game. And we're responsible for all of the updates and marketing that you see to promote those.
All right, cool. Okay, well, let's talk about Quadrants, which is why we brought you on today. Elise, where do we start with this? I'm going to treat you like a co-host.
Yeah, so for sure. Like, I think there's a lot of questions, not questions, but misconceptions about what quadrants are, maybe some misunderstandings. Maybe people aren't used to them, even though they've been around for some time. So yeah, that's pretty much what we're here to talk about. Just not only what quadrants are, but what you can look forward to in this quadrant, Foundations.
Yeah. Okay, so before we get to Foundations, so let's actually talk about quadrants and what are they, and are they actually every quarter?
Yeah, I can start here since I'm basically managing that part. So quadrants, we're in the second consecutive year of quadrants, and essentially we divide the releases that we have planned into 4 quadrants throughout the year. They're not, the timing is flexible for, when we start and finish a quadrant. So there's no specific time for each. And yeah, each quadrant is themed around any specific aspect of Eve and is often inspired by something that we have planned within the quadrant timeframe. But the content that we're delivering within each quadrant isn't always directly related to the quadrant theme.
Right.
And the one misconception around quadrants is that a lot of times they're seen as expansions. So with when we launch the quadrant, all of the update and content is expected at the launch, but it's really the start of something, and we'll continue releasing new updates throughout the quadrant.
So are we out of the expansion part of game development for good now, or are expansions still something that CCP will do?
So we're moving away from the expansions to quadrants, and the beauty of that is it allows us to keep the releases consistent. It allows us to be quicker, and actually through the quadrant format, we release more updates and more events within the same time frame.
Yeah, I think we can see that actually when we review the year.
Yeah.
Like you can just see
exactly
how much was packed into that. So you're getting a lot more.
Exactly. Yeah, if you look at 2020, there's so much that came online. Yeah.
So how are the Paradox or Emerald? How are the themes kind of put together? You said probably some things are developed that are ready to go, and so you would put those in that don't have to do with the theme. But when you actually do put together a theme, is that based on some kind of development path, or how do you put all these things together initially? The thing that, and how do you find a title for the quadrant and stuff?
It kind of depends on what is coming up in the next few months. It could be that, for example, Foundations, the next few months is action-packed with kind of the days of each empire at large. So it makes a lot of sense that this is something strong and like core to being proud of your empire. So Foundations very reasonable to expect that there's going to be a lot of branding around that in game, and players to get excited about what it means to be in the Mar Empire, or what it means to be with the Kaldari. And other times, Quadrant might be more focused around a specific gameplay feature. As Emerald said, that might be that this is one of the more interesting, let's say, anchor points of the next few months, and more conflict or more discussions are going to happen around that. And generally, we'll be talking about upcoming quadrants, several months in advance. Sometimes for the entire year, we loosely look at what themes or where we want to direct Eve in particular. And then those start, like a few of them will start to shine out in the sand. We'll start to really find some of the gems that we want to start to really try and explore. So I think Foundations this time has been one of them. Rain, the previous quadrant, the sort of fleet formations was really that kind of pillar. We wanted a lot of sort of feeling about tactics and strategy for the quadrant. And previous times we've definitely had more Triglavian focused with the invasion throughout last year in particular. But I think you'll see a little change here and there between each quadrant.
Yeah, well, this one actually had some Triglavian stuff that really blew the place open. So I'm sure you're seeing some of that. I wanted to ask Swift, looking back on the last quadrant real quick, just as a point of reference, the formations, have you guys got any information on how well that went over? Are people using them? Or are they still something that needs to be figured out by players?
They don't let me pull up that sort of information yet. I mean, they do. I just haven't figured out the buttons to do it yet. But from the community side of things, we hear a lot of people talking about the formations. FCs, I remember Pando had a great podcast where you dragged on a bunch of FCs talking about how they would use it. I think we're still in that discovery phase where FCs are trying to figure out exactly how they want to use it. I know in the war zone, especially down south, people have been using the different formations. I know Mr. V has been doing some things with that, trying to get more doctrines to be viable instead of just Munins and Axe. I've also seen some very inventive uses of the fleet formations. I think obviously just what people expect has already happened, right? But one of the funnier ones is I saw someone do like a question mark. They like organized themselves in a question mark and just started warping back and forth to the enemy staging Keepstar to be like, hey, when are you going to come out and fight us? So obviously there's no tactics involved there, but there's lots of like just goofy stuff going on.
They're communicating.
But yeah, in terms of tactics, I think FCs are still trying to figure it out exactly how they want to use it. And the people that were a little bit tepid to the response, I think, are warming up to it, especially as those skills are training, because they are locked behind some skill walls. I know some NPSI fleets have really enjoyed not just getting insta-bombed whenever they land somewhere, so they could like land on a grid without dying. I know Bjornby's had some fun with it. So yeah, I'm expecting to see more, but I'm pretty happy with where it is. Personally, I don't know about how everyone else feels, but
I think it's a positive sign. You know when a new song comes out and you like it right away and then you're done with it 2 weeks later? Like this reminds me of the opposite, where you're like not sure about it, but you have to listen to it for a while and then you get deeper and deeper into it. It lasts you for years.
Yeah, it's not a one-hit wonder, so that's good.
Yeah. Cool. Well, okay, let's go to Foundation then. Foundation, what should we expect in this quarterly?
Yeah, so one of the key things in Foundation that we'll be focusing on is the Empire events, which will be happening throughout the quadrant, tied to the Foundation, or sorry, the Empire Days. And for each of those, we'll be having a trailer focused on celebrating each of the empires and just kind of letting them shine. And bringing you into their world. So that is something to look forward to. And then there's a bunch of other, of course, updates coming. Paradox, do you want to talk about some of the stuff coming from Talos?
Yeah, sure. We've got several balance changes coming. So one of which, the first one, you'll have known by this time. It'll be some changes to the way that nullification works in the game. We're going to be making some changes there and introducing a nullification module to replace the passive ability of nullification.
Wow. So it becomes a choice that you make.
Yes, essentially.
So interceptors or combat interceptors or whichever interceptor is the one that has nullification, and even the yachts, are they going to lose it?
Yep.
All ships.
And the Tech 3, the module will exist. These ships will then have basically role bonuses to change both the fitting requirements and the reactivation of the module itself, and sort of increase the duration of the module. So the duration of the time that you can be in this nullified state. And we're also going to be adding nullification as a passive trait to all shuttles. Something I think has been asked for quite a while.
So you can tour around in a harmless ship.
Yeah.
With a very low capacity, you can't fit any mods to it. So it's not like you can use it to smuggle goods out of places. And if you get smart bombed, you are going to die, right? You can't tank shuttles up.
Yeah, they're paper thin and you can't tank them.
And in the same vein, for the same release, we're actually going to be changing warp core stabilizers to be the same. So it will be a active module. So you will activate the ability to increase your warp core strength.
Much like damage control used to be. You'd have to deliberately say, defend me now. Why would you do that? Was it just too easy at being a passive module that's just stacked?
So we're taking stock of a lot of passive abilities in EVE, and kind of really looking at these and basically the choices that players are making in fights, and also what counterplay is available for that. And nullification for a long time, I think it's been a very popular topic amongst all of us who play EVE. Is just this binary choice of completely saying as a player that I am going to bypass your gameplay. I'm just going to completely go past your bubbles, and there's nothing you can do. And it is interesting to have that discussion on these, and wonder what this gameplay could be like if choices were offered. We can make a really interesting sort of variations on the gameplay by enhancing it or adding penalties or buffs, that kind of thing. When we basically give you the choice to choose to activate or not, rather than a passive trait, which is much more difficult for us to balance against.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, this is also a subject that the CSM helped quite a bit on as well, or at least contributed to in some way.
Absolutely.
And gave quite a bit of feedback to Talos. There was a meeting, one of my first meetings actually with the CSM. It was pretty cool. Last week, it was just, they were chatting about this, like different ways to implement it, like different things, different routes to take, where the pain points really were. And that's where the CSM thrives, right? In that sort of feedback.
Yeah, exactly. We've had a really good chat with the CSM for a lot of our features from Talos. I think they've been really good at just being straight to the point and vocal about a couple of things, and I think we managed to find a really good balance. Sometimes we've chosen to go a certain direction, and sometimes they've helped us find our way. But overall, this particular one for nullification, we proposed a couple of different ways that we were going to sort of explore. They gave us a lot of feedback, and we've currently chosen one particular path. We haven't closed doors on anything else, but for this particular change, we're moving forward with basically what players will see very soon, which will be a module which is ship restricted for just the ships that currently have that ability, and we're going to see how that works.
It seems to be fitting into what appears to be CCP moving in a direction of active gameplay being rewarded, as opposed to things taken for granted because you've skilled into them, or situations that you've built up for yourself. This seems to be like, if you're playing and you're at the keys and you're active, that's where the real power is.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it doesn't negate any kind of passive gameplay we might choose. I mean, the skill system is based on passive training, especially when you're logged offline. It's sort of fundamental to that. But there's certain other elements of gameplay that, especially player-to-player interactions, makes much more interesting situations and battle reports when there is a series of play choices you can both make to each other that will lead to a really interesting story.
Right. So speaking of story, how do the empires fit into the world as it's developing in EVE Online? You're wanting players to fight each other because it's interesting and unpredictable, but it does seem like you're really starting to involve the empires as threats, as actual real threats. We saw some events that were CCP led, but we've also seen a development of artificial intelligence for NPC characters to be able to kind of populate the world in addition to players. Is that something that we're going to see a lot in this next expansion? Because you're talking about the theme of empires and stuff.
I think you'll see for a lot of people out there who are not quite as familiar with the empires, you're going to learn a lot more about them. There's information out there in game that tells you a lot about these, but it's a lot harder to digest it if you're not looking. So we're going to really put these at the forefront, and we're going to let everybody in the game know who are these four big empires.
Yeah, that's
who are the major players.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the intention here is to just bring some life and highlight the culture that's sort of the foundation of the EVE universe. And yeah.
It's the empire foundations, or the player foundations to the empires. And
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah. So are there other high level things to look forward to in this quadrant?
Yes.
Yes.
There,
Are you going to tell me now?
So quadrants will always have a series of balance changes, so you can definitely look forward to a lot of that. We did allude to the ESS reserve banks.
Yes.
They will be getting their keys in the game, and they will be distributed through some really interesting new content to play. And there'll be a significant update to the visuals around the ESS itself. So how the UI and the window interacts, how the actual assets and the sort of VFX is around. So it's kind of going to be almost like a redo of it, at least visually. Seeing some of the stuff in development now, it's looking pretty awesome. So I would definitely be excited for that. Those reserve banks are going to be big stories when they start to be busted into.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a bunch of money in there, right? But this kind of goes to show how the quadrants theme kind of works, right? So obviously in Foundations, there's a lot of thematic elements that are grouped together. But of course, there are other elements, like CCP Paradox was saying, that like balance passes, like VMR doesn't care about warp core stabilizers, right? So that's not something that you have to worry about just leaving in all these quadrants. There are some overarching themes that continue through them. The ecosystem, for example, like the ESS. So it's not just like strictly what fits into that little box there, right?
Yeah. In the Empire theme, as something else to look forward to as well as some new gates coming online that players will be able to contribute to creating. So lots of fun, highly anticipated gates will be coming online around that time as well.
So from what we've been able to look at and decipher, you don't have to tell us if you don't want to, but is it one gate per empire kind of thing? Are these?
There will be a series of gates. There's some inspiration for the empire specifically, yeah, but that's probably all we can say about it at this point. But
okay, so that's still
there'll be lots of fun. Yeah, still a surprise, but lots of fun new gates to look forward to.
Awesome.
Yeah, Hobo Leaks hasn't nailed it, right? So there are still some fun surprises for players to kind of figure out and learn as the quadrant keeps going.
Yeah.
Yeah. And eventually Caleb will believe it.
One day.
Is that, by the way, a little side issue here? The Hobo Leaks thing, is that just a bane in your existence because you want to unravel the game at your pace, or do you just take it into account, say when it hits Hobo Leaks or the test server, we know that players are going to start to figure it out?
I mean, if like Singularity being the test server, it's our choice to publish to that. If we really need something to be secret, we will keep it away from Singularity. But I think we've got a pretty good handle. We're actually really interested in sort of leveraging Singularity a lot more, getting a lot more things out there earlier for testing, and being really sort of open and just directing player feedback there. We've done this, in the long time I've been here. We've done this in various different stages before, but with quadrants, I think we'll definitely start to see differences between Singularity and Tranquility and our communication around this, just to make it a bit more clear.
Yeah, I guess with the balance,
I wouldn't say it's a bane in our lives.
Imagine for a balanced developer, it's great because you get to put things out without affecting the real game. But I'm thinking in terms of branding, are there spoilers in there?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we coordinate and work on the messaging for, just to make sure it's clear that it's not fully baked yet, and there might still be changes. But yeah, I think we're getting to a really good spot on it. Yeah.
And sure, there's probably been a spoiler here or there that we've not anticipated, but it's mostly just it's different to just read like a little comment on Hobo Leaks or something that doesn't give the full context of what's coming. So yeah, you can spoil yourself, but it's your choice whether you want to start reading into Singularity spoilers or not.
Yeah, I think there's a pretty good examples of players like reading into things and just being horribly off, just missing it completely. One of my favorite was one of the boxes that came in. It was like for a cap, like just a cosmetic for a hat, and it was like typo to a cat. And so people were just cat ears are coming, yes. And he was like, no, just a typo, kids, don't worry. It's fine. You're not getting cat ears.
Oh, that's awesome. I think
it's kind of fun to see what people say too, because then we go, huh, should we?
You get ideas, right? Idea generator. Throw in all kinds of typos, see what comes out. Whatever you put in there, people will try to make sense of it, I'm sure. I think the one thing that we don't actually understand is that sometimes, what do you call it? Sometimes a hat is just a hat kind of thing. Like, it's anyway.
Sometimes people are like laser accurate with the smallest amount of information.
Oh, really?
Other times, with almost all the information out there, they can be wildly off. But that's just the nature of the game.
Is there anybody that's always accurate? Can you tell us, or is that a secret?
There's a couple of people who I think are really smart and they can figure this out. But I won't name names.
Tell me after the show so I can consult the oracles as needed.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay. Understood. All right. Should we go over this quadrant foundations and see what themes are coming, and if you have any dates that you want us to know about? Or is that all published already?
I think it's published, but people might not like realize it or remember it or have committed those dates to memory.
Yeah, I mean the Empire dates, they don't move. They have days founded in the game, sort of in the game calendar, the Yule calendar. But yeah.
Yeah, I think the first one that's coming up is Galente Federation Day, June 21st.
Sorry, these are their anniversaries. Those are the fixed dates, and therefore we're going to be celebrating each empire on their birthday, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the first one you said, Elise?
Galente Federation Day, which is, I believe, June 21st. And there's like events planned around each one, login campaigns involved around each one. But I know the Galente are the first ones. And after that is Minmatar Liberation Day. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's in July, early July.
Are these based around like EVE Online's birthday? Is that kind of what was... In other words, these are all in the same quarter, I imagine. Like
they're definitely in the same quadrant.
Quadrant. I keep calling it a quadrant.
Yeah, I'm not as smart as Delegate Zero or CCP Burger. Those guys know the ins and outs of lore, but I do remember that they are very close to each other. They're not sporadic in the entire year. They are actually pretty close. Yeah. And I assume some super smart law guys out there will know that it's because of X reasons. I've said that I've got my Eve sauce to my right. Should definitely read that more on the coffee table.
Oh, the source book.
Yeah.
Well,
there's a lot of information in there.
The type is so small. As we get older, that's harder to read, right? But it looks cool. I can see why the designers pick small fonts, small thin fonts. Okay, but again, these Empire anniversaries kind of revolve around Capsuleer Day, which is the EVE Online's birthday, basically, but it celebrates the players. And did you say you had a video that or trailers that were coming up?
Yeah, so for the each empire, there will be a trailer. So instead of we didn't launch with a trailer at the beginning of this quadrant, in lieu of doing a trailer for each of the empires. So yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So I guess first one we'll see is
Yeah.
Galente.
Yeah,
and then
that'll be
Minmatar.
the first one. Yeah.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, so it's kind of like 4 trailers baked into one, and then also the Capsuleer Day trailer, which was really cool. That came out early May, for like first week of May, and it had some really great snippets of things that have happened in the last year in the community. Some really nice moments. I watched it probably 50 times, and I could not like stop smiling because it just made me so happy, like during different things in there, and remembering those moments and commemorating important times that happened in Eve in the last year. It was just really, really well done.
So what are some highlights of the last year that you've seen?
We actually went through with this with the CSM, and it was like this 90 deck slide going over what happened in the last year. So you don't realize all the stuff that happened, like in the quadrants from last year, right? Because they're so packed with stuff. There's never like this one moment where you get all of it dumped on you at once, right? It's just constantly being thrown at you. And in a way that you can digest like little pieces at a time, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it's so weird that people almost like they take it, they run with it for a little while, and something is always around the corner. So it feels like they kind of put that toy aside and they're playing with the next thing. But if you think about it, only a few weeks ago, we had this whole formations thing come in, which was something we've been wanting for EVE Online for generations. And it seems like a distant thought, but that wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, I mean, when we formed Team Talos, the thought was that we would try to release something every 2 weeks. And sometimes it would be like a very small balance change. Some of the earlier tier side moments were sort of around this. And other times it was a little larger gameplay change. And since then, I've been like internally just numbering the releases that we're on. And currently we're working on the 33rd Team Talos release since like October 2019 that we're getting out next week. So when I see that number 33, I'm like, wow, okay, we've definitely got a long way with all of these. And that's just one team's worth of stuff. And look at the other teams releasing all of these live events and daily rewards. And we have so much other stuff for new players. And yeah, it is a lot to digest when you look at just the sheer amount of things we're doing. I think it's a lot more than what the expansions used to give us. Those were a bit more bigger in some of the type of features that we might have explored with, but this way we can actually release a lot more and change things that players have been asking for a long time. And in fact, the next few weeks, Team Talos are going to be touching 2 of the most asked things for a while: Nullification and AFK Cloaking.
Oh, okay.
We did allude to that in the ecosystem post earlier this year. But yes, AFK Cloaking will be getting an interesting change made.
I've got to talk to you about this. Cloaking. Why is it such a hard issue to deal with? Like,
we actually, CCP Rise did a really good job of just writing out what is happening in regards to this. And there's a lot of secondary effects that are really interesting in EVE because of what cloaking does. Just in particular, just getting used to somebody being there as a threat and eventually letting your guard down just leads to really interesting situations. And obviously, one of the last CSM members, Olmeca, has been a really big on the hunting scene. Was very vocal about just how hunting works in EVE and what it means, what it leads to, what kind of fights and interactions. And AFK clocking has been a bit of a difficult issue for anyone to tackle because of when we just would say to remove the feature or gameplay outright, we remove a lot of interesting things that happen. So it took a little while, a couple of back to forth, and as actually CCP Swift says, we talked to the CSM a lot. I think we came up with a version 4 or version 5 in the end. We put this back to the table and we said, here's another version. And then they looked at it and were like, just started nodding, going, okay, I think this is it. It's not without a couple of questions here and there, but we eventually found something that we felt really comfortable with and something that works. And that is coming in Quadrant 2.
Okay. Well, so I asked you because we all know cloaking has different facets to it, and there are people who live by that gameplay, and there are people who are just oppressed by that gameplay. And so I wanted to get that understanding out there that this is one of those issues that is just got all kinds of sides to it.
I think the way you put it earlier is exactly right. If you're active and you're playing the game, you'll be rewarded for that. And that is actually that is baked into some of the fundamental changes we'll be doing. It'll be very obvious that if you are actively cloaking and trying to hunt, you're going to like not be penalized for doing so. You'll actually be rewarded. So I think that, and for future like changes that we do, you'll see that kind of theme running throughout, is that when you're actively doing something, you're going to be having a lot more interesting interactions and choices to make.
A couple more questions in that same vein, looking at new players and the whole experience of coming into EVE Online, and it's a dark, scary world, yet death is punishing. Death is a serious matter, as it said. Ganking and HiSec. That seems to be another one of those issues that has a lot of different angles to it. I think it was even said that if you're destroyed early on, it's good for retention. And there's some ambiguity about that statement. Is that something that is on your, is it something that you hear about a lot?
Yeah, it's something we hear about a lot, and it's actually something that we're interested in looking into. We've come up with a couple of proposals before on this. So I would suspect that you might be able to hear from Team Talos at some time on this this year. But definitely, ganking is, as you say, it's one of those, especially anecdotally, it is really hard to rely on an anecdote for this. It is a very strong part of the gameplay. To lose your stuff in EVE is pretty overwhelming. And especially at the hands of somebody who didn't really feel like it, they gave you a choice. You could argue about you had fitting choices beforehand, but there is still a degree of being ganked is quite outside of most people's control. And I think there's a lot of options we can do there. After seeing some of the proposals we've gone through, I think there's some really interesting counterplay we can add to the mix for those who feel that ganking is going to be an issue for them, or if they have assets they really want to try and protect or deny assets to people.
Oh, self-destruct your cargo kind of thing. I'm just
possibly.
Yeah.
This is one of those subjects where the CSM's input is also pretty incredibly valuable as well. It's obviously not the whole picture, right? Because they represent a part of the game, but their insights have generated a lot of conversations. Sometimes you would be surprised at who's taking which side in things, where some people that you would expect to be pro-ganking or anti-ganking say it's too easy. And the ones that where you think they'd be like, oh, we want to remove it, they're like, oh no, it's great, and they keep going. That's always a good laugh for me whenever the CSM proposes something that is like a little off-brand from what I expected. But that just goes to show you how seriously they take their position, right? They're not going after things that benefit them. They're going after things that will benefit the game.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen a lot of discussion on the concern of losing a new player, like somebody who's dedicated time enough to try EVE and start playing, and having like being ganked has obviously caused both players and developers like a lot of discussion about what it means and whether it's a good thing or whether it's a bad thing. We've had data before that swayed both ways of just what it means to players who are in a situation. But ultimately, I think we're definitely in a place that we can keep talking about it. It's not something that we've shut the door on.
Yeah, so at least I think that's all those complexities, right? Like, say I'm a builder and ganking should affect me in a negative way because you're destroying my cargo that I'm going to sell. At the same time, if I can get around you, my competition has to get around you, and that's a barrier for them to cross. And if they don't, then I get to sell at a higher price. So it's really, it really is a complicated issue. Somebody ganked me in a jump freighter once and laughed and wrote, how are you feeling kind of thing. And I was like, I feel great because I build these things, you made my day, kill more. But at the same time, everybody knows a new guy that quit because they got ganked. And even from Emerald, from a brand perspective, is that, coming into EVE, it has a reputation, but at the same time, we're becoming a more casual game. Is there a conflict here with like new players having this kind of destruction so quickly?
Ooh, that
I don't know. Maybe think about that.
Yeah.
I'd actually say I don't think we're becoming a more casual game, but rather maybe the infamous EVE learning cliff. We're looking at that and trying to make it more of a interesting curve for players. Like you've probably heard us talk about like sense of mastery lots, just what it means to have an amount of challenge at the start of your game with EVE that you can actually deal with and you're enjoyed by being challenged. And then on the more veteran side, you still have a degree of challenge that is appropriate for you. So
yeah.
I think the casual side, you might look at that on like a more new player focus, that we give them less to worry about or less to be concerned of them. But still, there's always a lot in EVE to fully master. And it's something that we talk about a lot when we introduce changes to features or new features overall, is just what does that look like? Can we give a player some interesting like blocks to learn at the start and then something more intense later? Like, do they have a path of mastery and progression in this?
Yeah. That's always a good way to get, just open up the player base a little bit more and get more players feeling successful and progressing and getting to those higher levels. Absolutely. Yeah.
That seems to be the other thing. Maybe getting ganked is a big deal as a new player. Maybe it's not. But one thing that a lot of people that I've talked to that kind of left the game that I know, they said, I didn't know what to do next. And so.
Yeah, exactly. Goal setting is super important in EVE and just games like EVE, where the goals are a little bit ambiguous because they need to come from yourself for the most part. And losing almost all of your stuff at the start, if you didn't really have an objective, some players just don't make the objective to get their stuff again. And then they start to wonder what's next and what they should do. Other players just take that adversity full on and say, I lost everything, I need to get it back. And they'll claw their way at trying to get their money back, get their ship, through inventive ways, maybe through asking in local or interacting with the person who ganked them, that kind of thing, or just diving into missions and trying to get the money back. But there's some who take that adversity and some who just don't understand what it actually meant.
Yeah. When I said more casual, I meant that it seems like you can get into the game, play a little while, and get out. And I don't know if all video games are going in that direction. Maybe you can tell me. But it seems like EVE's giving you options to come in, get into something, and then get out. Filaments, some of the free-for-alls that are happening now in the what's that arena called?
The Proving
Grounds.
Proving
Grounds.
Proving Grounds. Thank you. Yeah, it seems like there's more. Hey, you want a little combat? Here you go. And we used to have groups that would invent that, like red versus blue, or players would kind of say, you don't have to join a group, do a campaign, and wake up in the middle of the night to see some action. Like we'll get you a situation that'll provide some action.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
in a
yeah, I
sense,
think
that just plays against, like, do I belong to a group and we're doing this long-term thing, or is this a video game that I'm going to enjoy? And I think there's two things there. Am I living a sim life, an alternate life that is perpetual, or am I playing a video game? I feel are two different things. What do you guys think about that?
I think the stuff like the filaments and the proving grounds are like an additive experience. So yeah, you can still have that thrill of the chase or thrill of the hunt where you go after and try and roam for 6 hours to find someone. But at the same time, you could also just do something completely different with a few friends. Say, hey, we're going to go on this death trip by activating this filament. We probably won't come back, but we'll just catapult ourselves into the most dangerous corners of the universe so we can get there quick, have our instant gratification there, and then go on. But I don't really think, and I haven't really seen any data either internally or from the community where like these types of things undercut like the hardcore Eve is hard like gameplay. It definitely doesn't cut down on fleet fights and stuff like that, as we've seen those get just bigger and bigger and bigger.
I think
But
with
I think
oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh no, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say with all the releases that have been happening and everything, it just really feels like we're trying to create an experience for any type of player, and that's with the adding some of these features. So you can have your alternate life, or you can just pop in and do a quick, proving ground or event or something. I think it's like there's something for everyone.
So
yeah, I think Swift nailed it as well. It's more additive. We didn't remove something in lieu of this. We gave another tool for a question that was asked, or a kind of gameplay that players were finding a need for that wasn't being fulfilling. And ultimately, when we want Eve to live forever, think about in 10 years' time, what differences, what additions to the game for questions we're not even asking now will be made. I think we'll see some really interesting things. Like 10 years ago, we would have never thought about like things like filaments or proving grounds, but the questions were still there. Questions for movement and travel, or for arenas, or kind of more focused arena fights that players would want to do. I think over time we'll see Eve evolve and add all of these interesting combinations, features, parts of the game that we didn't think would exist before, but some of them might cater to like a more casual experience of somebody who just is looking to quickly, it's lunchtime, they've got an hour to kill. They might want to just log in Eve. Some people will just have the market as that. They'll just look at the market, they'll start trading, they'll start making a couple of adjustments. Other people wanted to do combat, but they didn't have that path. And some of those questions right now might remain as like, maybe instead of more casual things, it might be more hardcore. It's like, what is the long-term 2-year goal of an alliance, and how can they enforce that to their entire like dominion? Some really interesting questions to have. And I really like this kind of stuff because when I think about Eve Forever and I go through this exercise of what will it look like in 10 years' time? Like, what things are we going to add to the game that we're not even aware of right now? Kind of super interesting to think about.
It must be hard developing EVE Online because it's so many games in one universe. There's so many different varieties and things that you don't even see evolving because players are the ones that make it. Things don't go according to plan because players are mutating the game constantly. So it must be really difficult to balance all that and to keep attention from going to just one play style.
So I think it's harder not to get carried away with so much. Like, I think, and a lot of players, like if you're listening to this, you'll be able to question how many times have you thought about a feature or a change you wanted to see in Eve? And for us at CCP to work on the game, like, every day, it's so hard not to ask this question a lot. There's a huge amount of possibilities for what Eve can do, for what types of people, that it is really it's like just sometimes we need to focus, which is one of the big reasons why Quadrants is really helping us look at what we should do, what we should kind of accomplish, and what, you know, you guys as players should take away from the next few months of like what happens to Eve. And it's just, yeah, getting carried away with how many things we could do to Eve is pretty exciting.
To restrain yourself.
I'm never worried about focused on one thing, but it's just the many things, like, what is it, death by 1,000 cuts is what could happen is if we just said, what if we added these next 100 features to the game? What happens then?
You guys are full of ideas, I guess.
Absolutely. And the players too. I like see it nonstop. Just those what if questions are, oh, what would it be like if we just did this to planetary interaction, or if we just added this to a battleship, or things like this. And it's mind-blowing how much potential there still is in an 18-year-old game.
Well, kind of a universe, right? Like sometimes I think the game is like my relationship with the game, and it's not that long. I think at least played longer than me. Feels too long. Like I've been with this game for like too long, but it's more than a game, I think, to a lot of people. I don't know if you play a video game just for a while. I think you need a diversity of goals, you need a diversity of gameplay, you need a diversity of experiences, and very few games can offer all that in a way that makes you feel like it's worth it. And I think the Eve players are themselves so interesting, and I call it employable, but they're so like, you know, my friends call it normies or whatever. They're just so smart, and they're so intelligent and creative and stuff that you are actually very happy to be a part of the player base and you know, some sections of the player base. So it keeps you kind of sticking around without feeling too bad about it.
Yeah, what other game can boast literal history books about what the players have accomplished, right? Like, we have monuments in game that were just created because people have done incredible like things that no one could have ever imagined in any other game. So,
well, and if you're high-minded about it, you know, Mocha, or go ahead, you were saying.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, you know, just taking a look at this last year, even just all the stuff with, you know, Project Discovery and and you know, solving real scientific problems that we're dealing with in real time. It was like really cool. This player base is amazing. I just want to echo that.
Yeah, well,
I think one of the highlights for me was when we had EVE Online in the New York Museum of Modern Art.
That's right.
That was mind-blowing to me. I was like, when I heard about that and our endeavor to get it in there, I couldn't, and for those who saw what the sort of exhibit looked like, it was phenomenal. It had millions of people look at that while it was there.
Yeah,
super interesting.
And then you have actors and celebrities that play these games, and I mean, it's like it's a really, really nice interchange of a strata of, you know, very serious game players, I think. So it's, I mean, what you guys have done is amazing. So thank you for continuing to develop it in the traditions that it's had. And we really appreciate it, obviously, because we're all watching. Okay. And Swift, welcome to their team over there.
Yeah, I'm super happy and honored to be on this side of the fence. It's been an exciting 2 months so far. I look forward to the next however long it's going to be. But yeah, it's definitely been an amazing journey.
Not to put too much praise on you, but I can't imagine anybody more accomplished in the game that has joined CCP, from my opinion, but more accomplished because you've touched everything in the game. That's I
think that's just by virtue of being around for so long, right? So no one's been around longer at this point, so I think I've got a bit of an advantage there.
Well, CSM, Alliance Tournament Commentator. Not only have you done the big things in the game, but you've also had a number of like stuff that people won't even know about because it was all done for spying purposes and stuff. And the list goes on and on and on. But now you're like,
Eve, the one thing that makes Eve so special to me is that Eve is like constantly humbling, right? You listed all those accolades. I can list 10,000 just horrible failures for each one of those. So you like, even if you think you've done it all, seen it all, know it all, I'm just like the living embodiment that nope, there's something in Eve that you are definitely bad at. And you just have to, as Paradox mentioned, set some goals for yourself, figure it out, and start at the bottom and make your way up to the top.
and then do it all over again. All right, thanks. Do any of you have anything else that you want to add to what we've talked about? I feel like
I mean, when Swift was saying like set some goals, all I was thinking in my head is I still need to get better at radial velocity.
Oh my god!
That's why I just go for drones and missiles usually, but I still really need to, like, I've seen, especially when watching anyone in tournaments, just how quickly people can react when using hybrids and artillery. It's just awesome for just figuring out that in their head. Super jealous, but
a lot of layers. Well, talk to your partner over there, CCP Rides. He probably is good.
Yeah, I've asked him once or twice, and he usually just gives me like a fit that I don't have to worry about this at all.
Use drones.
He's just like, try this, dude. Just try this.
Fly parallel. All right. Well, it's real pleasure talking to you, Paradox and Emerald. It's nice to talk to you. And CCP Swift, one of the new members of the community team. Good to see you. Thank you all very much for coming and talking with us here at Talking in Stations.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Hope you guys enjoy Foundation.
Yeah.
Okay, and now back to Matterall kind of thing. All right, so I'll edit that last part out.
All right. Welcome back. Now we're live again. That was recorded earlier in the week in order to make it more convenient for CCP to show up so they don't have to show up in the middle of the night there in Iceland. And we're all over the United States and Europe as well. But that was recorded on, I believe, Tuesday. And Tuesday. So we held on to it until today. But it was a great interview with CCP Emerald and CCP Paradox, both delightful. And it was really nice with Swift there as well to make it really easy. It was just one of the nicest interviews I've done. It just seemed very light and informative and what's the word? Like, when everybody's getting along. There's a word for that. But anyway, great interview. I liked it. I hope you guys liked it as much. Yeah. Please excuse some of the awkwardness of the host in that one. But here we are again. And a lot was discussed in there. And it was discussed during the week because CCP talked about some of the stuff you heard, which was nullification and taking it away from the interceptor, but giving the option for many ships to have it of the small variant. And so let's actually talk about some of the controversy that has produced and deal with some of the issues that people are wrestling with. For that, you guys know we have Sutonia here, we have Arcia, and we have Caleb. And we'll try to get Hateless in here if he is around. But what are you guys hearing about nullification? What are people upset about?
I think there's a lot of disinformation on Reddit and people getting too upset about it. I think without really thinking things through too much. That's my personal opinion. Yeah,
isn't that always the case when a big change comes out? Now we'll consider this a big change. That there's a lot of disinformation, a lot of reaction, a lot of emotion, not a lot of thinking it all the way through.
Well, I think CCP is partially to blame a little bit here too, because the forum thread that they initially posted, I think, was made before they made some balance tweaks to what they were doing with it, and then there was further balance changes, I think, on Friday, and the thread wasn't getting updated. So I'm still seeing people complain about stealth bombers having notification, but they don't anymore.
Right. So they should probably update that initial post. I'm not
sure if they've done it already, but there was they may have already updated it. But...
Yeah. Okay. So just for people that aren't quite there, nullification. I think we should start with this because people forget this because I don't know why, but nullification
was not always here.
Was not always here. Yeah, like for a long time there was no nullification. It was a very, very special gift that they gave T3s in one module. So it wasn't until
2013. It was November 2013 when they added it.
Thank you. 2013, which is far past a lot of stuff that had already happened in EVE Online. Then you get nullification coming in. So for everybody who's like, why are you taking things away? It's like, hey, it wasn't always there. And the game was great fun between 2009 and 2013. All right, what else is there?
Well, unless you wanted to point out that if you look at the graph, you could do some horrible correlation and causation thing.
Oh, the population going down since 2013.
Or flattening. So maybe it was actually not any of the things that we've talked about. Maybe it was just nullification that killed the game.
It didn't kill the game, but I see what you're saying. All right, but what are some of the concerns that are out there? Do you have any concerns, Arcia, or do you see any concerns out there? Or not really?
I mean, as somebody who likes to dual box a tackle scepter in front of herself, I'm not like crushed about the changes, but I am like, I'm gonna have to rethink what I'm doing, maybe, because even with the module, it loses some lock range and it requires some fitting. But I'm not like upset about it. Like it's something that's gonna be the same across the board for everybody, and I'll try to adapt better.
But doesn't it also slow things down a little bit? You can't do the whole hailing a cab and getting to downtown in a few minutes, right? It's
you still
a bit of a speed bump, right? Because you can do it still with shuttles, but now everything else is active gameplay, so there's a bit of a speed bump effect, right?
But you still can with an interceptor too. So the way the module works, I guess we should explain the module a little bit. So it's going to be a low slot module. It's going to have a pretty hefty CPU requirement. I think it's around 30 to 44 CPU, depending on which meta variant you're using. And it has I think by default, it's a 2.5 minute cooldown. I think it's 150 seconds. But interceptors and T3Cs and the yacht get a 80% reduction in that. So it's effectively a 30-second cooldown. They also have double duration too. So the way it works on a travel scepter is you activate it, it lasts for 30 seconds, and it goes on cooldown for 30 seconds. So you can still travel safely. You might be slowed down a little bit though, because what you can do is you can activate it, warp to the next gate, jump, and then if your module is still on cooldown, you can just wait out the gate cloak on the other side, then you can decloak, activate it, go to the next gate. So it doesn't stop you from going gate to gate to gate to gate in a travel scepter. It does slow you down maybe a little bit though. Like you're going to have to spend like 1 minute per system basically.
Yeah, which actually stacks, right? It becomes a considerable amount of extra time because you also need to orientate yourself and all that stuff, right? So there is a bit of a speed bump here, right?
I do think that it's going to be something that gets a lot of people killed at first because they don't understand the mechanics perfectly. Because if let's say you start to warp and you like get close to the gate and you see a bubble on D-scan and you hit it, you're going to land in the bubble probably, because the way warping in EVE works is it decides where you're going to land when you initiate warp. So you have to activate it before you warp, even if it's like a billion AU warp and it would run out by time the warp's done. You'd have to activate it first, or else you'd land in the bubble, because the place you land is decided when you activate warp, not when you're coming out of warp.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. It decides where you're going to land before you warp.
Yeah. So like if you start to warp and you're in the middle of your warp, and then a saber drops a bubble, you will go as if the bubble never happened. They have to drop the bubble before you initiate warp. So like if there's a bubble up and you initiate warp and the bubble ends, like while you're in warp, you will still land as if you were at the edge of the bubble.
I've been in those situations and they're breathtaking. But now you killed the mystery, RCS. So whatever. I thought I was piloting my way through that, but that's interesting. I didn't know that.
It's that awesome side effect from anything that adds a little bit of complexity and active gameplay. It's that then there's a potential of massive pilot failure, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to lose scepters to dual boxing failure now. I already did lose them. With the new patch with all the rats on the gate, it's really annoying because you get shot by your scepter will always get shot by the rats. But yeah, on top of the classes that already had could fit them, there's a bunch of new classes now. So I think every hauler, as well as Tech 2 hauler, can now fit them. So that's the Tech 1 industrials like the Ideron Mark V, the Badger, deep space transport ships like the Okada, as well as the cloaky ones, the blockade runners like the Viator and the Prowler. They can all fit the Nullification now too. In addition to every Tech 1 and faction frigate, so notably that'd be Tech 1 exploration frigates, and Astero, I think, is the where you're going to see it the most, as well as the Tech 2 covert ops frigates as well.
Right. They called this the Great Escape because it seems to be that this part of the quadrant is something that is focusing on people actually getting away rather than prowling and hunting like Arcia does with the powers of the nullification. So I think it is notable that logistics are going to be able to get away in deep space. This is kind of a logistics buff.
Well, it also,
in my opinion,
it's both. I think it's both because it's a warp core. It's effectively a warp core stab nerf, right? And warp core stabs are the infamous super getaway module that everybody either loves or hates, depending on which part of the equation they're on, right? Now, if you have a ship that you expect to have a warp core stab, they have to activate it, and you can only fit one, so you know it's going to be 3 points of, it's not going to be like a full low slot of warp core stabs.
I think they nerfed it to 2 points now on the test server at least.
So yeah, you scram them, they're done, right?
Yeah, if you have a point and a scram, then you've caught them, or if you have a faction scram.
That's it seems to me like their opening bid was 3 points. That's a lot, right? That's like three different, the equivalent of three different modules before, now in one, and they seem to have dropped that. That was their opening bid 3, and now it's at 2. So it seems to me like they can play with that in the future if there's too many complaints of getting caught or this thing's useless, not being used, or that sort of thing.
Yeah, they could also maybe tweak some of the faction variants too, right? Because right now all of them give you just 2 strength. Right now there's some storyline faction ones, like I think one's called Aura or something. They could maybe buff those rare Cosmos storyline ones and give them free.
So another point of interjection is one of the faction frigates that will have the option of having the interdiction thing now is the Mollis Navy that has the plus scram strength bonus. I wonder if that's something that could be played. It's something I want to play with in Python when the module's out, and I have time to do so.
So, although interestingly, the interdiction nullifier does also have a drone bandwidth nerf. It halves your drone bandwidth. So the Mollis Navy issue would actually only be able to use 2 light drones if it has that fitted. So although you're mostly bringing it for tackle, right?
Exactly. But, yeah, you don't care about its damage. But
so go ahead.
That drone nerf is fantastic. I love it because stabbed Ishtars get wrecked, right?
Yeah, that's the big change on warp core stabs that I think everyone loves, is that now it halves your drone bandwidth. So one of the things that a lot of people encounter is Ishtars that have upwards of 3 warp core stabilizers fitted. So they're effectively, they're pretty much uncatchable unless they're completely AFK at the keyboard, because even the rats can't hold them because of the stab. And even if they're lazy enough to get caught by a player, you're generally not going to have 4 points of scram unless we're talking about a really blinged interceptor. And they still need to be asleep at the wheel basically to get caught by that.
So some of the things that we just took a poll, we'll give you the results of that in a minute if people like these changes or not, which is very interesting. But some of the things that I've been hearing out there are bombers were going to be a big problem with this, since they could fit nullification yeah. Well, but they changed that. But what was the complaint going on there? Maybe we shouldn't even discuss it because it might confuse people. But
there was also kind of mixed feelings on this too from bomber FCs as well. But obviously, stealth bombers, they have bombs, which are AoE weapons. They did kind of get nerfed recently with the fleet formations in general. Like, I know you can also use fleet formations with bombers to make them more powerful in some areas too, but generally they got nerfed. One of the main ways that you counter getting bombed is by using a hick with a bubble up to prevent warp-ins and just defensive bubbles, like using sabers, as well as if you kill bombers before they can warp off, then their bombs don't do any damage. And one of the best ways to kill bombers, of course, is if you have that defensive hick bubble up, some of them are going to spawn into the bubble. Maybe you can also have like sabers chase after them and catch them, because they're pretty small ships, and normally it's pretty hard for your mainline DPS to tackle them. But without the basically the interdiction thing would allow you to warp in through defensive bubbles, so the defensive bubbles wouldn't matter anymore. Although you could still potentially maybe kill those bombers before they could warp off. So I heard like some people saying it wouldn't be so bad because of that, because if you kill the bombers, they don't do any damage anyway. As well as, it just makes bombers like way easier to get in as well. You can't really like stop them with like dictators that are killing them as they come in if they're not getting bridged in.
So it would have been too easy for them to get in and get out if they wanted to. And part of the gameplay is if you kill the bomber before it escapes, their bomb doesn't do anything. Okay. But they changed that, so now the bomber can't use nullification, so it won't have that power.
Yeah, only the exploration-focused covert op ships will have it now.
Right. So another thing that was out there was that, oh boy, now everybody can be what is it? Fozzie Claw interceptor, which used to be an interceptor that could move around everywhere, do some SOV work, and get through any bubble. So it was unimpeded, and if you had enough of these, they could just kind of go and take SOV very easily. And now the idea was that was just interceptors that were nullified, but now the module can be used on T1s, so now everybody can do that in the T1 family of frigates.
Yeah, I don't think this is going to be a problem. Like, the cooldown is so long; it's it's 150 seconds, which is 2.5 minutes. The way Intosis fights work, obviously, is it's not on a set point in a battle. The nodes spawn all over the constellation. And the duration on it's only 12 seconds. So sure, you could. I think there was a post by Stitch Caneland with Rift, with like talking about Rift as alphering doing this tactic, but it only has a 12-second duration. So sure, you can warp in, shoot once, warp off, but then you have to wait for 2.5 minutes. And then let's say the next node is in the next system. Okay, well now you've got to use that warp. Hope if there's dictators on the in-gate, they're going to die anyway. Let's say you can warp to the gate jump, then you use your interdiction nullifier to get away from like a saber. Then you've got to wait in a safe spot for 2.5 minutes to get the ability back before you warp in again. Yeah, I just don't see it being powerful I think like the X-Wings, Aegis of Claw, those kind of things, I think they're dead like with this change. And that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I think they were considered a pariah at the time.
Yeah, more or less like every FC I've talked to considers them to be dead with this change.
And with like the T1 frigates and stuff, they get the full lock range nerf, unlike the Scepters that have the reduction in lock range nerf. So it's going to be questionable how much you can use them to do combat if you have the thing fit.
Let me pose this other question to you that I hear, and this is part of the line of thinking that I've heard early on, is like, what was CCP trying to fix with this balance pass?
I think a lot of people kind of assumed that CCP were trying to fix we've seen this quite a lot in the war, is, Eris or Malediction that warp in under 2 seconds that have 3 guns fitted in the high slots. And the idea behind that comp, obviously, is it's generally very hard to catch them on gates because they're immune to bubbles. They warp in under 2 seconds. I mean, even if you have like hyper locking stuff on a gate, you're only ever really going to get one of them, even if you're lucky, right? So they can just kind of go around, kill an Intosis ship, come back. They're very there's not much risk to them. Although I think Horde did actually come up with a pretty cool counter with Skybreakers.
Yeah, it was at least interesting.
But it's also that it ties into all the other things that CCP seems to want to do lately, right? It's not just one thing, right? We already mentioned the stabs, right? And I think we have stabs, we have notifications, yeah, we have cloaking. There's so many things that CCP seems to want to give this new angle of rewarding active gameplay, people actually sitting by the keyboard, expertise, so not making those human errors, and then shaking up the meta is what I'm getting the feeling that this is all about. Solving some of the long-standing discussions, and then at the same time shaking the sand and loosening up everything.
Yeah, the other area that I think there is still some pain points is the fleet interceptors, as we mentioned. I think the Stiletto and Malediction were probably in a very good place before this change. After the change, they're effectively losing a low slot as well as an untenable about a CPU, pretty much, which is going to nerf them really hard if they fit the nullification module. So we'll see what happens with that. I think another thing as well is that the Ares was just worse than the Malediction in almost every way. And the Crow is kind of ironic because the Crow doesn't fly at all because it's horrible as a fleet interceptor.
The Crow doesn't fly.
But hopefully what this means is, because I think the Crow has a bunch of problematic bonuses because it's got missiles and it has a range bonus. And if you guys remember back in 2013, like 8 years ago, when CCP originally did the notification on scepters, you used to be able to get a 2-second. The Crow used to have 3 low slots, I believe. I think it was 3 lows. And you could get a 2-second align on a Crow, while it also went like 4.5k a second or something. And it had like 60-kilometer missile launches, so it was just really cancerous. And so that's when CCP nerfed the agility on all of the interceptors.
Right, because it could move around really fast and deliver a payload of missiles at you.
But they didn't have to rely on tracking, so they were basically X-wings before X-wings were a thing.
Yeah, and so the low slot thing for people that don't know is that's where navigation and armor go. So if you could stack a bunch of navigation, propulsion adjustments or whatever, you could move around faster. And if you had 3 of those, that was obviously more room for bonuses than the usual 2.
Yeah, I really hope one thing that I'm really positive about is I think this actually opens up a lot of design space for CCP to buff those ships like the Crow and even T3Cs, which could use a little bit of love now, especially because one of the things that CCP had to balance T3Cs around was the nullification subsystem and slippery Peats. Yeah. I'm sure people know what those are. Those Tengus that were really hard to probe, that were also nullified while also having like super long range. And CCP pretty much had to like completely gut T3s, like give them like huge lock range nerfs and agility nerfs on the interdiction subsystem just to be able to deal with that ship. Just a slippery Pete. So maybe now that it's a module, maybe CCP, it gives them a lot more freedom to buff T3Cs and it gives them a lot more freedom to buff the Crow.
Paradox did say that, didn't he? This will make it easier to balance in the future. That caught my attention.
Yeah, because they can balance nullification separate to the ship classes, and I think CCP Rise actually one of the things that CCP Rise said that I remember when they made the deployable Sino Shuro field deployable was that they wanted to decouple Sinos from a ship class because. Like if they wanted to buff the Pilgrim, for example, let's say they wanted to give the Pilgrim another low slot, well, they have to consider that has that can fit a Sino, right? So there could be a case where maybe you want to buff the Pilgrim, but you can't because it has a Sino on it, or maybe they want to nerf the Pilgrim and take away one low, but does that mean that since armor recons are too squishy now that with Sinos, so does that make armor like supers untenable? That kind of thing, right? So I think it's a good thing overall. I do think they will need to do a balance pass on the fleet scepters, like the Crow and to a lesser extent the Ares need some love there, and T3Cs need some love. But hopefully this means that they can do those balance changes.
Do you guys see the pattern here? I see it with production, and I also see it now with ships. I imagine it's going to ripple through many parts of the game, and that is to decouple things in a way that they have various areas that they can tweak. Like with production, it is instead of everything being minerals, they split it into 5 or 6 different types of ingredients, and they can tweak those individually to affect very specific ships as opposed to all ships when they, say more trit is needed for this, less is needed for this. And it seems like they're doing the same thing here by stripping away innate powers and saying, no, those are module choices. So now we can tweak module choices. And even on those module choices, like the nullification, or actually, no, the stabilizer, they can say the stabilizer is 2, but if you have a faction variant, that's 3 points. And so that gives them a lot of room to really play with factors instead of being.
But this is back to the whole issue with everything that they've talked about in the past. That Eve is so much dependent on conditions, right? So and I know that we talked about the fact that T3 should really get a buff of some sort, especially to make wormhole space more meaningful and give it that utility that is the special T3 platform, right? So if you wanted to do something like that, you would have to go and fix this thing, as Sutonia just hinted at. So even though we talked about, well, they've promised us that they will buff T3s, but they can't buff T3s until they also decouple this slippery Pete stuff, right? So everything needs loosening and decoupling before you can actually start making some of those old wanted and meaningful changes, right?
Yeah, so Tonya, that I heard early on, we had a 3-hour session. It was immediate reaction, so it was kind of like first impressions. You can see it on youtube.com/talkinginstations. It's called Reactions to the Nullification, and it's just raw emotion of people talking. But wormholers came on and were really adamant that if you put nullification, or not nullification, but stabs on, maybe it was nullification, on your frigate, escape frigate that's in your battleship, then that was a guarantee that the pod would survive. And in evictions and wormholes, you want to pod people out of the system so they can't come back in. But if they can always make it back to their station, and you have 1,000 battleships in that station, then you'll never be able to evict people. Do you have any thoughts on that, any of you?
So I think that being able to put a nullifier on a frigate escape bay is going to do a couple things. What the wormholers are saying, I think, is true, because you can't save your medical clone in a wormhole outside of Thera. Thera is the unique one, but like you can't save it in J1337420, right? You have to save it somewhere in high, low, null, or Thera. And potting people means they have fewer people to keep fighting you with. So if the battleship dies and you have a frigate that warps fast and has that nullifier, it can just warp out of the bubble. That also, in all areas of space, means shiny pods are safer. So battleships are very likely to have shiny pods, even in like NullSec, where some people are deterred from doing so. In LowSec, a lot, like almost everybody has shiny pods. In NullSec, some people are deterred because you can more easily lose them if you die in a bubble.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to think about it. The wormhole thing is interesting, but it does force you to fly battleships. And I think, from my my perspective, I think if this encourages people to fly battleships more in NullSec, that might actually be a good thing. But I don't know. I don't think I understand wormhole space enough to really comment on if it's bad or not for wormhole space with the eviction thing. It does force them to fly battleships, which are hard to haul in, and the good kills if you get them. So maybe even if they can, come back with more battleships, that's just more big kills for you, right?
Yeah, I think it would. But Macarials, I think, were a big part, at least at one point, of wormhole combat, even during evictions and stuff like that. I don't know if that's still the case
But
well, I would like to know where those thousands of Macarials are at the ready in wormhole space, because they're really expensive now.
Yeah, I don't know if
now
there's
they
even,
are, yeah.
there's like 9 nightmares in Jitter right now or something.
Yeah, now they are. So maybe that's a part of the equation, is like if you're going to use the faction variants, not that they're short on money. Wormholers are known to have a bunch of gold chains around their neck.
So, like, the question is, a lot of times I would say this probably favors defenders in wormhole eviction situations. And whether that's good or bad, you'd have to ask a wormholer, because I'm not. Because I think it's harder for people to get battleships in, but at the same time, they usually set up a POS and move ships in advance. So maybe it favors both sides. It keeps the fighting going on longer.
Yeah,
if they want to use
that might be a
battleships.
cool thing, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. Unless you're trying to evict someone and then you need to strong arm them out of the system, you need to send them out. But okay, so that is nullification, and we talked about stabilizers as well. Those have changed. And of course, as you heard earlier from CCP Paradox, it's more like you're making choices beforehand. Some other stuff they talked about was in this quadrant, they're going to deal with cloaking. And I think AFK cloaking. What do you guys think is going to happen there?
I really don't know, to be honest with you. I assume that there's a way, an active way. So I'm assuming like some kind of new probe or directional scanner. I think it's mentioned like a new intel tool of some kind in one of the dev vlogs. I could be misremembering though. I assume like if you sit around cloaked in space in the same spot for a certain period of time, then you'll be able to be found with some new mechanic that lets you get to their location approximately.
Yeah, the discussion has really been about creating a counterplay, right? So it must be some sort of thing that you engaged with, either as a system owner controller or something that you deploy. Exactly how they've solved it, I have no clue really, but the CSM has tried to solve this many times, and there's been many discussions with CCP where CCP came with the suggestion, say, so do you think this will solve it? And the CSM pretty much agreed, no, this is going to be horrible. So I think Brisk said this is third attempt from CCP, and this time there was not that many objections. Fourth.
I think it was fourth, yeah. But it doesn't matter. I mean, multiple attempts to try to fix this because it has so many facets, which was another part of the question, which was how many different angles are there to this topic. And for those players that don't know, AFK Cloaking has been around a long time. And it essentially means that if you wanted to go and harvest in peace in NullSec, an area that you won, through Sov warfare, you couldn't because there was somebody in your system, except they were invisible. You knew they were there somewhere. They could be asleep. They could live on the other side of the world and be asleep, but their ship was there. And that was worrisome because if they happened to wake up when you're in the middle of doing some harvesting, for instance, then they could call in an airstrike, meaning their friends, and destroy whatever you're harvesting with. So it's really a way of dampening people's ability to make money in systems they won in Sov warfare. And so they thought some people think that's pretty unfair. The person doesn't even have to be there. He just basically puts a ship in the game and he goes about his real life. So I think one of the things that was said is that the cloaking will reward being at the keys. So you'll have to be there either to recloak because you've been uncloaked or decloaked, or there might be some other gameplay involved. But if you're at the keys, you should be able to stay invisible. But if you're not, maybe not so much. Not sure. That's the only clue that we got, I think, out of that.
Well, it's funny because it's two of the features in Eve that is notorious for not having counters, right? Nullification and cloaking. There was no counterplay. It was all in the hands of the person using it.
Yeah, I'd definitely like to see it could be cool if maybe it was a system upgrade and like it prevented AFK cloaking, but then you also get like semi-delayed local, like 15 seconds of before you appear in local or something. So there's like a trade-off to it. I don't know what it's going to be, but that's kind of like what I would think of, what I think would be cool.
One of the interesting things that happened in 2019 was a thing called blackout. You may hear of it. It was referred to the Triglavians putting a lot of pressure on the energy grids, basically, of NullSec, especially the outer NullSec, and collapsing communications. Therefore, local disappeared. So you couldn't tell if anybody was in your system or not. And it was a temporary I think it was 45 days or something, or maybe 60 days of blackout where you couldn't tell. And people went all over the place. They were nuts. Some loved it, some hated it. But one of the things that was interesting is its effect on AFK cloaking, because now the AFK cloakers needed to be at the keys to remind you that they were in system, because they're always invisible. So they had to type in, "Hello, I'm out here. Beware. I could kill you at any time."
Oh, they didn't really have to do that though, right? They just stay cloaked in a Sino ship, and whenever they find someone on D-scan when they're back at the keyboard, then they just drop them. And I think AFK cloaking in conjunction with blackout was one of the worst parts of it.
Well, because it was assumed that every system was AFK cloaked. So it was oppressive.
You couldn't tell if someone was AFK cloaked anyway, so there would be no way for you to even, bait out a counter escalation or do anything else that you can do.
Right. So the assumption, instead of saying like, well, it looks all clear, or I'll take my chances, was I'm assuming somebody's out there, therefore I'm not undocking to do what I usually do. And that's why you could see a lot of different things tank. And they didn't sweeten up the rewards enough to make you go out and risk your ship while you were trying to harvest in this darkness. So it never really met any equilibrium. They turned off blackout before it could do that.
So I think a lot of people in NullSec especially they prefer the safety to the idea of a reward. Like you see, like you enter a system and Ishtar's a warp off, even if like right now you're a travel scepter or something, and they have bots and local systems like in advance reporting your approach. They know what you're coming with, and it seems to me, and I'm obviously from the outside of the null blocks looking in, that there's a lot of people who have like all the information of everything around them, or most of the information, and they're still kind of more cautious than I would be.
What a great point you made, that people prefer safety over treasure, for instance, because safety is time, right? That setback takes away your time. And so then you have to think about what's time valued over gold in the game, basically, or ISK generation. And is that equation changing now that the economy is changing? Because these things are all related, right? It's an issue of, do I value my time, or is my 3 or 4 attempts at doing this worth the effort, worth the time that I'm going to waste? Maybe that's a bit deep, but Caleb, we'll talk about that offline. I think there's an economy there, an invisible economy that is going to be very interesting in the future.
It's back to the change of averseness and safety is always preferred to rewards, right?
Because it becomes with the added pain of humiliation too, right? You didn't just get set back in time, but you also now...
This is why people like the AFK playstyle, right? It's because if you can do something with minimum effort, right? It's minimum effort and maximum safety and predictability. This is why you hear so many EVE players these days are really complaining to CCP for them adding things like unpredictable stuff and RNG content and stuff like that. And sure, there's things that really shouldn't be in
RNG?
in
random number generator.
Yeah. It should be randomized, right? There's things that should not be randomized, but if something is perfectly predictable, it stagnates, right? Because then we figure it out and we put everything in spreadsheets, and this is just the human condition. This is what humans do, right? So it's a fine balance. This is why the whole age of chaos was something that the EVE player base got really angry about, because if you're just adding chaos for the sake of chaos and complexity for the sake of complexity, it's bad. But as I was pointing out the other night, you cannot have expertise, speciality, and agency without also getting complexity. That is a natural condition, right? So this is really about tying things together in meaningful ways. So you may be the actual agent of chaos. It's not CCP. It's when you do something that you push the sand dune and create the avalanche and all that stuff, right? This is the type of gameplay that we need. We don't need random stuff and unpredictable things. We just need something that is extremely hard to predict.
I like space weather, but we'll talk about that offline and during the week where we can really dig into a topic for an hour. Oh, one more thing that came out in this was that they're going to put some bridges into
Gates.
Well, first of all, before I go on, is there anything else with cloaking for you, Sutonia or Arcia?
Oh, not specifically.
Don't have much to go on yet, but we'll look for something coming in this quadrant. And there was one other thing, actually, I will bring this open now, and then we'll go over to bridges and the trailers that are coming out. But we surfaced the idea that they're touching, CCP is developing into areas they didn't normally develop into because there were too many angles at it. And one of those was cloaking, but another one was, and I asked this question, ganking and some of the stuff. And it sounds like they're looking at it and thinking about it, and there might be something coming down the road. Do any of you guys have any thoughts on that?
Is that a trick question?
Not you. The other two.
I mean, one thing that I think Paradox or CCP Swift said that I thought was interesting is they said something about like assets. Like, I think one thing that they could do maybe that doesn't necessarily detract from either side, because I generally think ganking is fine personally. I know Caleb will disagree completely with me on that one, as the previous week or the fortnight before, I think. But one thing that CCP could do maybe is make it so like if you get ganked in HiSec, like let's say you're flying a hauler with way too much stuff in it. Right now, what happens, right? A ganker kills you, half of your stuff drops, and half of it is destroyed permanently from the game. What if you kept, like, I don't know, half of what got destroyed permanently somehow? Like, it gets sent into a station or...
asset safety kind of thing.
Yeah, because then the ganker still gets his loot, and...
you're not totally destroyed.
I guess it's less of a module material sink, so it would be a negative to producers because there'll be less demand to replace the modules that they lost. But the gank person would still keep some stuff, maybe.
There's a middle way to this, right? Because I've always said that one of the big mistakes that CCP made was when they allowed ships with extremely large cargo space to actually scoop from space, right? I think the solution is in cargo containers. If you could not just easily scoop a cargo container, so let's say I'm in a freighter and you're in a lot of tornadoes, right? Or don't have any big ship that can actually scoop a large or huge container. You have to hack it, open it, and then scoop the content instead. There's ways to use containers in the game that I think would be the most emergent gameplay creating ways of doing this. And it's the same with solving hangar space in stations and stuff like that. I think CCP has an obvious thing, low-hanging fruit, in using containers in a meaningful way again. Put things like secure containers where they actually need to be hacked and can't be scooped at all without, I don't know, exploding or something. There's many, many fun things you could do. I think asset safety on ships in space, bad idea. I hate that.
Yeah, I don't like that idea. I think destruction is a integral part to the economy, and there's a lot of destruction in HiSec ganking, and any changes that are made to lost smells in any area of space and any kind of ganking changes are essentially economy changes, and you have to be really careful with any kind of broad changes to that. But I have no problem with ganking. I
Well,
think
doesn't
that-
everybody say that? I'm not discounting you, but doesn't everybody say, "Oh, ganking's fine. I love ganking," as a way of saying like, "I'm not afraid of you," or like, it seems like the default position is, I'm not afraid of you.
Here's the thing: is most experienced players aren't afraid of it because we know what not to do.
This is
You
gonna
also
be
have a
super
different
slow.
relationship. You have a different relationship with your equipment, I think, than new players do. Maybe.
To some, like, I've never been ganked. People have attempted. I've never been successfully ganked.
This is just like listening
Challenge
to
taken.
people before the Vortex
Right.
got changed, saying there was no problems with Vortex. There is a problem.
Yeah.
And yeah, people are saying you can't get ganked in LowSec. Yeah, most of my play is not in HiSec, but I've played in. I've gone through HiSec like regularly enough, like daily even sometimes when I have to get to like wormholes or buy stuff. A lot of times I do buy stuff from Jita and Red Frog it and then move it into LowSec. But I fly around HiSec enough that there's been chances and there's been attempts.
Yeah. And I'm just kidding. Challenge accepted. You would probably kill me in a holler, even if I was in a warship. That's.
I mean, my holler's not going to be like a character, you know. I'm one of those degenerate multi-boxers, right?
Let's be fair here. If Suetonia and Arcia was in a frigate and I was in a battleship, I'd still get whooped.
Wow, that happens.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I don't have a problem with ganking, but I'm an experienced player that knows not what to do, and I know how to get around it. Like you just don't put too much stuff into a certain ship. You split your cargo. You use MWD cloak tricks.
You web yourself.
You can web yourself. If you're using a freighter, use instant.
I did that, and the gate guns killed me.
This
You
is
have
like
to duel
telling
yourself. You have to duel yourself.
You have to duel yourself first. I didn't know that. So I'm like, hey, let me help you out, my alt freighter pilot, and boom.
And you just
blew
get
up.
concorded.
Yeah, I got concorded.
This is exactly like in real life, if you're telling a white van dude that, first of all, okay, to actually ship this package from point A to point B, you have to only max have 2 other packages in your cargo. You have to drive at night, and you need to have a friend right in front of you. Like, okay, I'm just trying to ship stuff around, dude.
You have to sustain 70 miles per hour or 70 kilometers.
Like, here's the point. When I happen to move something really shiny, like when I move the paladin I was using for an incursion, I scanned a wormhole chain, and I went through that and used a scepter in front of me to go through the wormhole chain and I put the paladin through wormholes.
Easy.
Right?
Oh yeah, I forgot.
Instead of that 0.5 chain from Heck to Galante space.
Arcia, I feel like I just want to learn how to stretch, and I'm talking to a Cirque du Soleil acrobat. Like there's a whole league of difference between.
You get a 500-page manual on how to actually ship stuff around in EU. Like, okay, and then you have to learn to live with the fact that all of your ships are transparent and people can just look into them and see exactly what's in them and what the value is. And like everything when it comes to ganking in Eve is silly. It is antiquated and silly. I love blood sports and I love destruction, don't get me wrong, but there's just something completely wrong about the way mechanics work in Eve.
All right, well, remember, you weren't supposed to talk during this episode because we have big, long thoughts on this stuff. We want to move on to some other stuff. But Arcia, I'm just trying to make sure everybody knows how much I am afraid of you in space, and that's what my point is.
I've died like 1,400 times. Like, don't be that afraid.
Yeah.
Half the time I'm picking fights I can't win, right?
It's like the Grim Reaper is not afraid of death. It's like
why would you be afraid of like part of the game? Like,
you have a different relationship with equipment. You have a different relationship to
it's ammo. Ships are ammo.
Ammo, yeah. It's you are clearly using the game's equipment as a means to a different end than just collection.
Like collection is like at a certain point, like I open my asset window and the game freezes. What do I need to collect, right? I don't want it to freeze longer when I open my asset window. But
some people are collection people. They're hoarders, I guess, or they're not hoarders because that's different, but it's more like some people count killboard kills, some people count ISK, some people count assets, some people have Hangar Queen ships that are rare. Everybody has like a different fixation in EVE Online, and all these things have to collide. So relationships to equipment are actually different for different players, and new people are desperate to just have a little bit more as they're climbing. But it's always.
I feel like I might be wrong. I might be wrong, but I feel like the super, super, super new people aren't ganked as much as people who've been around for a while and haven't learned some of the convoluted mechanics. Because when I was a new player, and this was back in like ISO Boxer days when gankers could just push a button and all their ships would fire. Because a lot of them are multi-boxing. And I put like all of the assets I owned into a bestower and autopiloted like 30 jumps. And I didn't die somehow because, the how was I wasn't valuable, right? New players aren't valuable. Like I used to do that like repeatedly.
You think there was like Tuscan Raiders like looking at him saying like,
oh yeah, I was probably scanning like 6 of those gates, right?
She's too skinny.
I don't even know. I didn't even know because I was not a quick picker upper of the Eve curve. It took me like 2 weeks to jump out of my starting system.
Oh yeah.
Like I was not some kind of like prodigy that dingled into doodling and I was a dumbass. Somebody gave me a bestower. I didn't even earn the million ISK for it, right? And I stuck everything I owned in it and was a nomad, right?
So, Tonya, what's your relationship with equipment?
I mean, ships are ammo. I lose tons.
It's like water, right?
So, Tonya loses more than me, right?
Yeah, I think if you look up my character on ZKL board, I've lost 5,625 ships, and I'm rank 16 in the entire game. So the only 15 other players have lost more ships than me.
You're kidding! Wow, and you're one of the notable PvPers in the game. So.
Yeah, well, I fly like really cheap stuff mostly, like Tech-on frigates, and because they're really cheap and disposable.
So. The thing about notable PvPers is...
Keep going, Sutonia. Someday you'll be number 1 at losing ships. Go ahead, RC.
That's Evan McLean. Evan McLean is number 1 losing ships.
Notable PvPers is that they PvP. So, of course, they lose ships, right?
Yeah.
Especially people who do smaller gang content or use cheaper ships. Because if you don't have your 200 closest friends watching your back, it's a little easier to kill you, right?
Yeah. Well, if you've ever watched...
Let me just try to point one thing out. If people would like to be able to play in other locations than the Forge when it comes to actual industry, production, and markets, we need to get some of these things changed, because I would estimate that 95% of all valued assets are in GDEF 4.4. And if you want that spread out so it's available for being used and actually being sold and traded elsewhere in the game, something needs to be done with ganking, because you simply cannot get this stuff shipped out in an efficient way when shipping is this nerfed.
Oh, do you think that there's a problem with ganking in general, or do you think it's just a problem with ganking new players? Because
I think it's in general. I don't think it's a new player problem at all. That's more griefing. I think the way that HiSec forces the gameplay onto the hands of the attacker is, I think, cancerous. I think the fact that I have to package my freighters or my courier contracts within 2 to 4 billion each, otherwise they're almost guaranteed to be scanned and then attacked. I think it's a massive, massive problem, because
I think that's a good thing.
I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, I know you guys do, but it's because you don't realize that this is why we have this centralized economy, and it will never change. We will never get back to multiple hubs and multiple services elsewhere in space if we do not have efficient shipping. Go look at a real live map of how much shipping is actually active at all hours of the day, how many ships are actually needed to support the infrastructure that the planet has. It is exactly the same in EVE Online. The fact that you can just do train robbery and piracy at sea with no risk is just a joke.
Well, it's not. There is a risk though, right? Because they always lose their ship, and like the decision you have is you keep your freighter under 4 bill, and you probably don't get targeted if you use a webbing ult and stuff.
But again, that's like telling the white van guy that he can only drive one package at the time. It is just silly.
I mean, isn't that how it works anyway? Like, I'm pretty sure like they're insured up to a certain value, right? And they never put more value than what they're insured worth in.
But you still have to, if you're a professional shipper, you still have to carry less than 3 billion or less than 5 billion at a time, because it is simply too risky to carry more. And then you have to do all this shenanigan with trying to obfuscate and work around intel and scans and all that stuff. It's just so silly. And the fact that you don't realize how silly it is so tragic to me, because this is not where you want PvP. Because you're destroying things like arbitrage and secondary trade hubs and services between players elsewhere in space. You're basically forcing everything into Jita 4.4, and it's just really, really dull and dumb gameplay.
Doesn't getting rid of Ganking like destroy arbitrage in another area too, though? Like, if I'm an industrialist and I start producing in a Mar, I know I can sell it at a higher rate because I know that people can't move that stuff from Jita to a Mar to undercut me really quickly. But if you couldn't gank people, then they just would do that. There would be.
But again, I'm not against PvP. I have no problems with war decks, and I think that everything that's got to do with shipping needs to be moved to a new and better war deck system. My problem is that you cannot do efficient arbitrage in EVE anymore because the gankers have figured everything out.
Arbitrage is buying in one station, moving it to another, and selling it there for a higher markup, right?
Yeah, but there wouldn't be a markup if moving it was risk-free.
I like Suetonia's idea of getting.
We're not talking about risk-free. If it's war deckable, if it's got politics involved.
Most groups aren't war deckable unless they put a structure down.
Okay, so how do you deal with a freighter that's in an NPC corp then, Caleb?
There's no such thing. It should not be possible.
But,
so you can't undock a freighter unless you are war deck eligible.
Exactly. Any big hull, you need to actually be in a player corp, otherwise it incurs massive docking fees.
But a lot of player corps are not war deck eligible. So like you need to be in a war deck eligible one, you're saying.
But that's because we've got a war deck system that solved an old problem but brought a new one.
Yeah. More noob smash. Like, if you want a jump freighter now, you have to put down a structure that's war deckable, and then all the big guys are just going to kill your structure. They're going to take your core, and you're
the other way around.
That's the way you're gonna.
You need to flip the war deck system that everyone can be war decked, but to have a war deck eligible, you have to have a structure in the space where you want to aggress.
All right, different day because we're off track. But let's go back now to something else that was announced. There was going to be trailers for each birthday of Empire. So Galente will be the first one. There'll be a trailer, and then they'll actually celebrate their anniversary. And they're going to do that for each of the empires over the next quadrant. Also, there's going to be some bridges coming in and maybe an event to get those built or not built, maybe, if players can prevent it. Maybe something like Pochven, or the lead up to Pochven's, the Luminality systems. But Liminality. There's also something else that is really big that hasn't been talked a lot about, and that is those really big banks from the ESS that are out there in NullSec are going to, the keys are going to be released to get the money out of those. What do you guys think of both? Oh, actually, what do you guys think of ESS first?
I think the ESS is great, and I'm glad the CCP keeps iterating on it and making it better. I think the latest changes they made, making the payout take a bit longer and not be as synced up anymore, with the 2-minute, 45-minute cycle timer and the 5.5-minute timer, feels a lot better than the 6.5-minute timer.
So you think they got it at the right place now?
Well, the actual modifier and variable that changes the payout is upside down, but otherwise it's a great system.
I love it. For the ESS itself and the fact that there's just now accessible dead space in Null.
Yeah, and this is the big banks, right? These are the ones that have collected money over months, not the one you could raid at any time.
The interesting thing too is with the musical chairs that's kind of happened in LowSec, there is like a lot of big banks in areas that people aren't completely living in anymore. So Fraternity obviously have like, they're still in Oasa, but I think like 7 of the banks that are over 30 bill are in Oasa, while Fraternity are properly staged in Veil of the Silent. So it'll be interesting to see if someone could maybe go over there and maybe take one of those banks if Fraternity don't have plans to take them themselves. There's also like the area where Legacy and Brave used to live, like Impasse and Esoteria. Like no one's really living in Impasse except for the new guys that moved in. So there might still be some big banks around that area that people can fight over that aren't necessarily controlled by, one big alliance or something.
Yeah, that's neat because the banks were put into place before migrations of certain groups, so money was left behind. But what's going to be interesting is the little complication in the war, right? Because Delve probably has some. Well, the war started before the banks were announced, so maybe there's not a lot of money. But Fountain, I think, had some money in it. We will see. It's a big treasure hunt, basically. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. And of course, the birthdays for the empires are going to yield bridges. Some important strategic gates are being put in, possibly.
Oh, so the new bridges are going to co-align with the celebration days?
I don't know, but I assume. Yeah.
I assumed that the Amar gate was going to be first because that was the one that was on Hobo Leaks first, and it was the only one that had text for a while. But the Amar Foundation Day is in August. I think it's after the Mimitar and Galanti one, if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't be first if they're doing it in that order.
But do you think it will fit the calendar like that? Because they want to get one story thing out and one video release from each faction, right? So
well, the interesting thing as well, right, would be if the gates are like mutually exclusive in some way. Like, what if all 4 gates are at the same time in an event, and maybe only 2 of the 4 gates can get built, and it's whoever contributes the most to specific empires. So if people donate the most to the Amar and Mimitar gate, for example, does that mean that the Galanti and Caldari gate doesn't get enough ore to build, or are they going to be like separate events where all 4 could be built or 4 could not be built? I don't know.
I have a feeling it's going to be like the T3 Destroyer event, where maybe the order they're built in depends on who gives the most materials, but we eventually get them all.
Yeah, that would be my hope, that all 4 are going to be finished. It's just which ones are going to be finished first.
Because like when we had the T3 Destroyers, it was the Confessor and then the Sweeple. And was it the Hecate and then the Jackdaw? Like, I think it was that was the order. I know the Confessor and Sweeple were 1 and 2. But yeah, I think it's going to be like that.
Was Jackdaw the last one? Funny enough.
I think the Jackdaw was the last one.
Stupid Jackdaws.
I think it was the Hecate actually, but I can't remember.
I think it was Jackdaw then Hecate.
No, yeah, I think you're right. I think it was Jackdaw and then Hecate. It was Amar and Minmatar first. I think mainly on the backs of role players. Right?
Yeah, the cool thing is if you actually look at the item description of the blueprint, it tells you the 10 players who donated the most materials.
Oh, yeah, the Confessor one has a bunch of the Amar role players on the blueprint.
I picked up the Jackdaw blueprint, and I did it for day 1. I was like, I'm going to make a killing because I missed the other 2. And so I made all these Jackdaws, and it was like day 1 kind of thing. And I started shipping them to where NC Dot was staged, I think in Providence at the time. And I got stuck in Amar and forgot. So I came back like 2 years later, and there were the Jackdaws that I never sold sitting.
I really just want those gates to actually be locked to negative standing people. Then I will applaud.
That would be pretty funny. You need Caldari standings to take the Caldari gate.
Yeah, just any positive standing would be
just
fine.
Reverse that.
I'd be okay if it's just 1 or 2. It's just if you're negative, no access.
Interesting.
I think that standing locks gates in general are a bad idea.
Did they just reverse that
It
experiment?
works so well for Pochven, right?
Yeah, it worked so terribly for Pochven. And it
that was a positive scale, right? It was not if you're negative. I think it's a completely different scenario if it's a negative
But
standing
you get
lockout
negatives
and not a positive standing access. There's a difference between the two.
But you get negatives whenever you work up positives for a different empire, for their rival.
Yeah, but you
empire.
can seesaw that, or you can just stop engaging in something that's.
You can do epic arcs as well, I think, to get all of the positive.
It takes some knowledge to seesaw that properly, though. But anyway, interesting.
That adds agency. You make a choice if you are consistently shooting one.
You got to go to Eve University school to figure out how to seesaw that. Otherwise, you're going to find you're trying to get somewhere and you're locked out for some weird reason.
I hope CCP does something similar to the tech-free blueprints, though. They did the really cool landmarks for the Federation Grand Prix, where they list the 10 fastest capsuleers in all of the different races. It would be really cool if they listed the 10 people who contributed the most on a monument next to the gate or something.
I expect they're going to do something like they did. I think it's going to be a mirror of the Tech 3 Destroyer event, and that was on the blueprint. Maybe it'll be on a little. Yeah, like you said, a monument on next to the gate. Like when you warp to a gate that has a little mission agent or just a little doodad by it, right? So welcome to this constellation, right?
You know what I think they should do? I think they shouldn't lock the gates, but they should put diamond rats from that faction around the gate. So you can take the gate, but you might die if you don't
there you go. Same effect, a little more drama.
The Galente Navy is camping whatever gate.
But what about the nature of these gates, though? What are they going to do to the landscape? Are they shortcuts?
Well, I think that the Minmatar gate is a way to get to Concord faster when they want to bomb it and invade the Amar again, like they did with the Elder Fleet.
Yeah, so I think the gates, the specific systems are on Hoboleaks. I don't know if that's a troll or a decoy by CCP, but they seem like they would all be good systems.
They kind of hinted it could be one or the other, right?
Yeah, I think CCP Swift, I keep calling him Elise, says something about Hoboleaks. Not everything's been found in Hoboleaks or something. But anyway, I guess we could mention the gates. So there's one gate for every empire, and all of them are kind of interesting. So the Amar one goes from, I think, Tashmerk on LowSec to Stain. So it would create a LowSec route to Stain, which would be really interesting because it's been a meme for 6 years or something. Stain guy will be very happy. I hope to see him mining in that system. The Caldari gate goes from a system, I think it's for jumps from Jitter, and that goes to a low-sec Amar system in Genesis. That's, I believe it's 7 jumps from Amar. So the interesting thing about the Caldari gate is it would potentially create a shortcut from Jitter to Amar, which would be 11 jumps from Jitter to Amar if you took that shortcut, although the system shortcut would be through low-sec. So it would probably end up being Rancer, Tama, Vacamia, one of those low-sec systems that are always camped.
A choke point.
Yeah, but it would give you maybe the option to go through it in an interceptor or something, assuming that it's not smart bombed, which it probably will be.
Well, then you just need tax like you do for Rancer. Rancer is easy to get through in something like a scepter.
Yeah, it probably won't be too bad. I mean, it might be camped for the first 2 weeks it goes up, but then it'll
probably just be camped forever.
Yeah, and the Galanti one goes from, I believe it's I think it's low-sec to high-sec Solitude.
Solitude, yes.
Yeah, so Solitude is a weird region because it's kind of disconnected from the rest of Galanti space. You have to go through I think a shortcut. You can go through Syndicate to get there, but it's 5 null-sec systems and 3 low-sec systems. Or you can just go a huge long low-sec route around through Genesis.
Aridia.
Genesis and Aridia, yeah. I know you go through part of that.
So the reason why the Galente Gate is to Solitude is because that was one of the campaign promises of the current Galente president, Solis Agard. So it's actually for a lore reason for that one.
It's kind of cool that CCP foreshadowed that with
she won election on the promise of connecting Syndicate to the Federation. the rest of the Federation, because right now the only gates in, as Suetonia said, are from Syndicate and from Iridia, so it's not gate connected to the rest of the Federation, because Iridia is the Amar Empire and Syndicate is Syndicate.
It's one small jump, but it saves you like 20, 30 jumps, doesn't it?
And it might probably also be camped.
Especially from the Dixie, I think it takes something like 13 jumps off if you're going from the Dixie to that Pacific Solitude constellation.
It might not be camped as bad. It might kind of be like the Molden Heath Island, where the couple jumps.
Will they be camped if they get the diamond rats that Suetonia just promised us?
Is it
I don't know if I don't think CCP will do that.
It's a LowSec system.
It's a LowSec, okay.
Yeah, it's a LowSec system, but you already had to go through LowSec or NullSec to get there, but it would be another route that would be much faster. And I think, as Arcia mentioned, with a funny lore explanation, the Mimitar gate actually goes from two jumps away from Heck, where it's going to be, and that goes to Pakshi, which is in the Sanctum constellation in Genesis, so it's near there. And this gate will be actually very interesting for haulers because it bypasses a lot of the Silk Road if you're taking the route from Jeddah to Mimitar space or Mars space. And it also bypasses a lot of the really dangerous 0.5 systems as well. So you won't have to go through as many choke points where you can get ganked.
And that's going to shorten your trip basically from Jeddah to Amar, as well as other areas.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's fantastic. These bridges that there are gates they're thinking of putting in, to me, they're very well thought out. I doubt they're fake. It just seems like too much thinking went into these. Especially the Galente one, now that I know that it's lore-based and has been foreshadowed and stuff. That makes sense. What do you guys think? Do you think they're fake, or do you think these are real?
I think the gates are real.
I still strongly suspect that they might be fake, and they're going to give us some completely different locations when they launch.
It's possible, but
Perimeter 1, DQ1 gate win. So yeah, the thing that I'm not sure on is whether or not if these are going to be 100% sure thing or not. There is an event tied to it that's like kind of like Resource Wars. I'm sure it's probably the same thing, where you mine in a site and then you deposit the ore into an orca, you fight off NPCs, and if you're successful, you get some reward. And I'm assuming once people have done those enough, the gates get built. The thing that's interesting to me is whether CCP will not build the gates if not enough players do it.
I get the feeling that they might be playing around with the idea of, because it sounded like it's not just those 4, but actually more gates are coming. And I am suspecting that they might actually be trying to bring in some gameplay where gates can be offline and you have to put them back online. Again, this is back to the whole what could happen to, well, not faction war, but all-out war, right? Then things like this would actually be very meaningful, especially if you add standing and similar locks. Same with the NPC station access.
I mean, all that ore was being teased before it was like, oh no, it was all the EOM after all. But we could very well see an all-out war in the future, and maybe there'd be some weird stuff going on with it.
Describe
Well, again, if you think about
it, hold on, Caleb. We got to just get these out. EOM. Describe.
EOM is the equilibrium of mankind. They were the NPCs you're shooting in the current event sites that posed as mercenary groups associated with the various empires and attacked the planets.
NPC group.
They're an NPC group, a lesser known pirate faction, basically, that thinks that by killing everybody, they can open the gates to paradise.
They also think fitting rail guns and shield tank on a Mari holds is a good idea too. So.
Yeah, the rail shield avatar.
They're a little misaligned in their goals and their methods, but
I just get a little bit offended when everyone and their mother aggresses against me when I say that we need something like standing lockouts.
My mother does not aggress you,
but we need it in a meaningful way. The point is, if you want actual meaningful gameplay in EVE, especially when it comes to NPC stuff and what faction and empire you're playing with, consequences need to be introduced to the game in a much more meaningful and impactful way. And again, well, okay, you can't maybe dock in Caldari 4.4 if you have -10 with Caldari. Sure, you can go and cry, but it's really not that much of an issue, because you just go to a player-owned structure, and this is where you get TTC. This is where you get HiSec structure ownership politics. It's not a problem anymore, because we have an alternative. If you want access to an NPC station, you need to have positive standing, or at least the costs for using them should be massively increased if you're negative standing. This is not something that will destroy gameplay. On the contrary, it will actually add to the gameplay. If you want to remain neutral, live in wormholes, move to nullsec, where you don't get any of these impacts in a high impact way, right? If you want to play in HiSec, follow HiSec rules.
I feel like if you block out people who don't have Caldari standings or have bad Caldari standings to G to 4.4, you're going to get all the people who don't give a crap with Caldari standings, and then the people who want to play with another flavor for whatever reasons, whether it be RP or just flavor fun, get kind of screwed.
Why is it different than what you do with the Concord standing? Why not have this rebalanced in a completely new way, where
security status doesn't stop you from docking?
But again, that's what it should do. In HiSec, you should not be able to dock if you have negative Concord standing, right? And this is what we need. And of course, it should bleed off, right? And same with positive standing should also bleed off, but the speed should be different, right? But to get meaningful gameplay, we need consequences, and right now they're not there, and it's just sad.
We're going to table this. You're like a crocodile dragging me back into the weeds. I don't want to go there right now. I just want to, at this point, go to one last subject, and that is.
Wait, before you do that, Madarul, what I just want to say, like, what kind of gates would people want to see? Because a lot of people have talked about for a long time having an NPC station, an NPC constellation or stations in the drone lands, and it would be really cool if there was maybe CCP could solve that issue by maybe putting in a new gate that goes to the drone lands from, let's say, Mimitar HiSec or something. So, are there any other gates that would be interesting?
Bring the highways back. Thank you very much.
The super highways to Uli.
Yeah, make Uli great again.
Okay, put that in the chat there if you want, or put it into YouTube comments, and we'll review those and get Suetonia some info. By the way, Arcia, also known as baleful dysnomia, thanks for answering what diamond rats were. Can you answer that verbally now?
Diamond rats are NPC. Rats means pirates, but they're NPCs of the various factions in space that have improved AI over the normal AI to kind of make them react similar to players. They have the ability to warp on grid. They tend to be stronger than the average NPCs that you fight in a mission. You'll see them, they bash structures. You'll see forward operating bases spawn in a system, and then Blood Raider or Garistus, rats with a diamond in their name, will warp around the system and hunt and even shoot structures that have negative standings. Basically, they're NPCs that have better AI than the normal NPCs that do some dynamic things.
You just put something together for me that I never knew, and rats comes from pirates.
Yeah, rat comes from pirate.
Didn't know that. I just thought it was things in the wild that you shoot. Okay, pirates.
Little mouses, little
mice, rodents.
Little squeak mouses.
Yeah. Oh, funny. Okay, that makes much more sense. Well, Arcia, something happened in Pochven with you. Do you want to describe what was going on in Pochven just recently?
So there was a station in Skarkon called All Invaders Must Die that was put up when the Skarkon evacuation event was going on, before it got yeeted to Pochven. It wasn't particularly much used station, but we kept it around because we didn't want to unanchor a station in Pochven because it'd be kind of a meme, right? Like, because you can't anchor new ones, imagine unanchoring it. So we hope to get a fight out of it, and dock workers and Streebog obliged. We the whole timer fight was not last night, the night before last night, and it was something like 60 on our side and something like 90 on their side. And we won on the ISK, but they won the objective. The two fleets, the dock worker and the Streebog, were able to ping off because LowSecers can't bubble, and we couldn't hold them down. Like AAR, LowSecers can't bubble. Anyway, Astra House died in Pochven and Skarkon. After a pretty fun fight, a lot of people said it was one of the, on our side, the side that lost because we lost the objective. A lot of people said it was one of the most fun fights they've had in a long time. But it was like an hour and a half of fighting in Skarkon over an Astra House Hall timer. And so another station in Pochven is dead.
Does that end your presence in Pochven for EdenCom?
There's going to be another something somewhere. So,
are you guys actually, now that Pochven doesn't have standings blocking you from moving around in there, are you guys in there a lot more?
Capable of being a lot more. Like, the fight was only able to be good because we were able to form up somewhere else that was easier to get into than Skarkon, and then move as a group 10 jumps to Skarkon because we use the gates to get there instead of going through the hassle of Skarkon is particularly annoying because it has split wormholes. Some of the wormholes are in Ethereum Reach, and some of the wormholes are in Molten Heath, and you can't get from one to the other without going all the way around because Skarkon used to be the point that connected them.
Got it. Well,
so the
good.
ability to jump gates made the possibility of having that fight, well, not the possibility, but it made having that fight like a lot easier for everybody because I'm sure they had people on their fleets that didn't have standing too.
All right, thanks for that report. So Tony, last thing, I'll ask you about this. Maybe you know, maybe you don't, but what happened in 3TAC-D in the war area of Delve in regards to bombers and the initiative having some success there against Pappy?
Yeah, I believe Init had two pretty successful bombing runs. I think it was the Friday night, Saturday evening, where they.
I think it was an Australian. Sorry, I think there was an Australian one too. If I heard.
Yeah,
sorry.
It might have been all time zones. I don't know if it was 2 or 3, but I think they got the initiative got a really good bombing run when Pappy were trying to jump out of the system. There was some traffic control or lag as people were trying to leave, and they got bombed on the gates. They lost a huge fleet, and I think before then as well, they also lost a big fleet in a similar way, trying to extract on the system and getting bombed on the gate. So when you're trying to leave with a bunch of players, it's like the server doesn't perform maybe as expected. So,
do you think that's what it was, the server?
I don't think you can put the entire blame on the server. Obviously, it's a tactical decision to warp everything to the gate, and people kind of know what they think is gonna. People kind of know when you try to spam a gate with 700 people that there is probably going to be some lag. I think I remember it happening to.
Maybe someone forgot.
I remember it happened to I think AFK in the original World War B.
Yeah.
Or the Casino War, depending on which side you're on.
If I'm not mistaken, the FC, or at least one of the FCs from Horde, was coming back to the game after leaving pretty much after Fountain had begun. So basically about 8 months ago. And shoot, his name again? You told me earlier.
Oh, Alpha Star Pilot.
Alpha Star Pilot. Yeah, very well liked Horde FC. Took a break. He needed it and did it. But he was on. I think he was in a monitor on those fleets. Is he back in the driver's seat, or is he just kind of shadowing other FCs right now?
I have no idea, but I'm sure there are enough people in Pappy or Horde who can probably tell us in the chat.
Yeah,
if he's back or
he's back. Like, yeah, and if these are his first 2 fleets, because he was on both of these in a monitor, which is usually an FC ship, could it be like just getting your sea legs again? Is that maybe what's going on? I don't know. I guess that's an open question that somebody will answer for us. But it's nice to see him back if of course his real life priorities are squared away, and I'm sure his guys are happy to see him back. And what they lose, like $1 billion and a half in, sorry, was it $1 trillion and a half of munins, I think?
I don't know if it was $1 trillion. I think the battle report I saw was 200 bill.
Oh my God, totally different. But I think combined, like all three, I'm listening to sometimes to the wrong people. So I don't know how much was
lost. It might be $1 trillion if it's counting like all 3 ones and also what the Imperium lost as well. It might be like 1 trill total for the system.
Let's say 500 billion, which in T2 doesn't, I don't think that hurts in the right place.
Well, I mean, the Eagles disappeared entirely from the jitter market for a few hours. So,
oh, they got bought up. Yeah, I think where it hurts more, or at least my inclinations, is if you're killing faction pirate ships, those are going to hurt more because those are now a lot more expensive to build. But T2,
this is where I just
change.
warn everyone when we're talking about T2 hulls. There's a risk that the CCP is going to be going, hold my beer.
Yeah. If you're going to get them destroyed right now, you want to rebuild them right now, because we suspect that T2 is going to get hit with some production expansion soon at some point. So I think if you're going to take a blow, T2 now better than later. But who knows? This is all conjecture there. But anyway,
it's not really conjecture. It's just what's next.
Pando, I think, was the bomber FC, and he is known as a very good bomber FC and has been for the last few years. So he scored some pretty good hits there.
Well, there were some funny memes with this one, though, because the day before this happened, I think Pro God Legend said that Goons have no real bomber FCs.
They call that the karma boomerang, right?
Yeah. Well, he's technically right, but I think because he's an initiative, right? Pando's an initiative. But that doesn't really matter because they fly each other's fleets pretty much.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah. It's a really good karma there. I think the on the scope of things, though, you look at this and it's nice because it reminds me of YTAC. Was it YTAC 2 or YTAC O, where Boat and Sister Bliss, who's the leader of Initiative, really took out a Raven fleet that was threatening a Keepstar and turned that battle all around. And that was celebrated as a big victory, a big halting point.
But they're not good FCs either, right?
I won't answer that, but PGL was also the one that was flying the Raven fleet that got wiped out. So this, he basically, slipped on a banana peel there and got pushed over, so he was involved in both these things.
The same fight where he lost 2 unrigged ships or something trying to get to the fight.
Yeah, he was trying to get the fight. It's like he was trying to put his clothes on while he was running to the church.
They were in cargo.
He was just not fully dressed, which is kind of funny. But anyway, a good turning point, or a good smash to remind people that the Imperium is not dead. And but does this thing turn around momentum? Do you see any adjustments happening?
No, I don't think that this is really going to change what Pappy decides to do. I think this is just them testing what they normally would do. It's unfortunate, but I don't think it's going to stop their momentum at all.
All right. Well, that's good. We'll keep our eyes open. It has been a slow week, admittedly, the week before and this week, as the Imperium defends vigorously their constellation that they're in. It's their last constellation in Delve, and actually their entire empire. They're down to 1 constellation, and most especially 1DQ, their capital system. But it is about 2 weeks of going back and forth. A lot of fighting, not a lot of changes, not a lot of strategic strategic objectives being fought over, except a lot of testing. It seems like there's a lot of testing and a lot of resisting of those tests, which is good for the Imperium. I will say the initiative did have a deployment that they announced a week ago that didn't go very well, or if their objective was just to harass, maybe they had a partial success, but they really couldn't really land a beachhead. They would put down a structure and it would get destroyed. They'd put down another structure and it would get destroyed. Something like that, right?
Yeah, and I believe their staging fort that was in Catch was destroyed too. Or Curse, one of them anyway. I think they still have a staging fort around Curse or Catch area because they had two.
Mm.
I don't know if they've stopped the deployment though, because they moved to an NPC station that was 2 jumps from Ethereum Reach. I think it's Accio, is that it? I can't remember the name of the system.
But you're right.
One of those.
I think they're no longer trying to put down their own base. They're just using a base that's there in NPC space. So limited options there, and they appear to be rolled back. The other area that's on fire is Esoteria. I think the Bastion came in and kind of took that place over some time over the last 8 months. There was a period where they kind of took over the area. Now it's being rolled back through what looks like a new coalition, right? AOM, Evictus, and there's a third group there. I want to say Severance, but I think I might be wrong. Let me look it up.
Oh, well, those guys were already in the same coalition, right? They're both members of Legacy. So
yeah. But I think they're...
I think X-Def are doing stuff in Faith of Bolus now, though, which is interesting because they're killing iHubs. I wonder if X-Def... I assume X-Def might consider moving down there, because one of the dangers that I think Fire Coalition have is once the dust settles, Pappy are not going to... Let's say Pappy win and they're in Delve. There's going to be that huge gulf in the middle of the south that no one's really in. And if they get attacked, then Pappy can't really get down there to save them. And I think a lot of the poking and prodding that has happened to Fire Coalition in the recent few months have shown that they're not quite as strong as I think a lot of people thought they might be. So it might be interesting to see if they move into Faith of Bolus or they move closer to Legacy so they can continue being allies if they abandon the south east.
Yeah. That's a very good point. You don't want to be too far away from your allies, not in this weather. All right, cool. Anything else in NullSec going on in the north or south?
I think it's pretty quiet in the north right now. I mean, there's still the stuff that's going on in Vino, I think, between like VVV and the Japanese Corp, the Japanese alliance that I always forget the name of.
Kadarius?
Yeah, those guys. There's still the kind of regular fighting going on there. Still the kind of regular skirmishing between the sort of guys who live in the western side of the north now, like Volta, TP and stuff, harassing Fraternity. But no like serious wars between the two right now.
Is there a story there at all? Like intentions, motivations?
I don't think either side wants to invade the other side right now, and we're in completely different time zones, right? Like Fraternity can't beat Volta and TP in Euro time zone if they were to try and invade. And we can't beat them in Chinese time zone, so it's kind of a stalemate because of the time zone.
Yeah, that probably won't. And it seems like Fraternity has signed a lot of peace deals lately. Like their diplomacy is an overdrive. Something in Pochven, something in the LowSec area. They dealt with the tribute.
It's almost
area.
as if they're empire building.
Well, on the one hand, they have an aggressive military. On the other hand, they have some pretty good diplomats who are getting deals signed, you know? I was thinking that this World War B2, or call it what you like, but the war in Delve is really a diplomatic failure because Imperial legacy was a thing before this war. So essentially, the Imperium lost legacy as an ally, and Pandafam, I guess, picked up legacy as an ally, and that formed the Pappy group that is now attacking Delve. And that's
essentially been a disaster because they've lost 4 regions, and
I don't think it was really down to Goons. I think that the kingmaker in this case, right, was Legacy. Like they either choose to side with Goons and invade NC and PL, like PanFam. Like I think Matani said that was their original plan that they were in talks with doing with them. And then the other one was, do you side with PL and shoot Goons? So I don't think it was necessarily like a diplomatic failure on Goonswarm's part. I think it's just, Legacy was the kingmaker in this case. They choose who's going to die. And
there's a couple factors. One is that Legacy started to get filled up with people that didn't like Goonswarm over the last 2 years, right? You had Fafer join. You had...
PGL was the biggest Goon hater there.
PGL, right? yeah, but he behaved for a long time. He even started calling it World War B, or he started calling it the Casino War in 2016. He started referring to that as the Casino War. So he was behaving beyond his capacity to behave normally. But you had Fafer and you had Manny. Manny joined TES too. And these are people that do not like Goonswarm. So you saw like an undercurrent building. But at the same time, here's where I think the diplomatic failure was. Vili, I think, is very public about being essentially, I don't know if he's very public, but he was not treated well by Aerith, by Matani. First of all, he left Goonswarm because he felt he wasn't treated well. He wasn't as appreciated as his equivalents were. And then even more recently, that was a long time ago, but even more recently, he was mistreated on air, live on air. He was kind of made to bend the knee, essentially, while something was going on. They had some disputed territory in Legacy space. They had essentially Fortizars that belonged to the Imperium in Legacy space.
Oh, the Pittsburgh incident, is that what
before that? Before that, there was, before that, there was an incident where he was made to bend the knee in public kind of thing. And I was thinking, these guys are allies? Because this is not treating your ally very well. And that had slowly built over time. And then you had the Pittsburgh thing. But I think the Pittsburgh incident where he used one of those Fortizars to attack Legacy just reminded everybody that Imperium imposed Fortizars in Legacy space. And Imperium's point of view was, hey, those are so we can help you out if somebody attacks you. Those are friendship Fortizars. And Legacy was like, yeah, but we don't really have a choice. And I think that was a diplomatic failure.
I think
those
it's a diplomatic...
were there for mutual defense, right? So like either Legacy could get over to the Imperium space or Imperium could get over to Legacy space, and there was rules around there that were agreed to by both sides, right?
Isn't like a diplomatic failure when everybody's blue with everybody else, because then you have no game?
Yeah.
Or am I crazy?
Said like a true LowSecer.
To 100 alliances, right. To be a diplomatic failure,
like,
depending on.
I'm like always surprised when people don't have like 9 blues and like 500 reds.
I think Asia is literally a hublander.
Well, I think another factor too, right, is that Legacy and PanFam were working together a lot more with the TTT agreement that was originally between Horde and Legacy, right? Then you also had the invasion where they kicked out Guardians of the Galaxy from the north.
Exactly, yeah.
Which had Test and PL working on the same side, which probably got rid of a lot of the animosity that was there before.
Absolutely. And I think that was deliberate. I think that was a trial run. I think you need time to acclimate people to not hate your enemy. The Imperium, when they joined Legacy, had to do it through propaganda films. You know, the Imperial Legacy, born, you know, we're friends. You know, you had this whole media campaign to say, stop hating each other. We're friends now. We're going to work together. But that was very artificial. And I think you could still hear that there was animosity between the guys because it was very quick and very artificial. And I think having some kind of a campaign where Horde could start working with Legacy for a mutual goal, I think that was a lot slower. And in fact, it was too fast anyway because the war ended too quickly. If it had gone on longer, you would see a better joining of Horde and Legacy, getting used to each other, getting used to fighting. So I think that war ended a little quicker than they wanted it to end.
It also probably helps that the majority of those alliances that were in Guardians of the Galaxy ended up going into Goon Swarm, right? I think with the exception of Siberian Squads, which joined Legacy, Dracarys, and I think Salt Dragon's group, they mostly joined the Imperium, right? Either as an alliance in the Imperium or in the Initiative.
Yeah, he's literally in the Initiative right now.
So, you know, if you both hate Guardians of the Galaxy and now they're in Goons, that kind of helps things too, right?
Yeah, so interesting stuff. I think there's a lot of diplomacy people don't see because it's not as easy to see on a kill board, but it matters. And I feel like this war was a combination of two things. One is bad diplomacy. I think you lost Legacy. But two, I think you also needed to see the game change. Everybody recognized it. The game would never change when you had 3,000 to 4,000 structures in the Delve area and a powerful empire in the Imperium. I don't think anything from their perspective, Pappy's perspective, anything could happen in the game that didn't account for what the Imperium was going to do. That's a very public sentiment from Pappy and one of the reasons for the war. Okay.
Well, I still think that the only real sane casus belli I've heard is still Dunkdinkles,
which is pretty much what I just said. However,
but the point is, all the other ones are unrealistic and not real and just drama spin. What Dunkdinkle said was pretty much true, but now it's almost flipped the other way, right?
Yeah. Rezek says you just really Pappy-sided today, to be fair. I don't know what he means, but he's saying probably I'm speaking from Pappy's point of view. That is the Pappy point of view, if I didn't make that clear. But it makes sense to me. And after talking with various leaders in Pappy, that's what they have consistently said over time. I look for changes in what they're saying. And the consistent stuff is what I project, what I report. The Imperium, I don't know what their reasons are, but they have public reasons as well. And I don't really know what those are. If you know what their motivation for getting into this war are, let me know. But it's really just an issue of survival. Yeah, it's survival. Like, they don't have a say-so in this.
There is zero win condition for Imperium except one. Survive. And it's looking fairly easy right now.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking that it was Test is next to destroy Test, but that is, as somebody pointed out, a different affair, a different war at that point. So they don't have...
It's also one of those classic Imperium hedgings, right? Because no matter what, when this war ends, it doesn't even have to be Imperium, but Test is going to be on someone's agenda, right?
Possibly. I don't know how this looks afterwards. I don't think many people do because the world is changing so fast. I don't even know what's important.
If Goons get evicted from Delve, right? I think the Matani have said that they're going to go on a revenge campaign. So presumably Test is still next, even if they get forced to go to NPC Delve or have to stage in some other NPC area.
Yeah, and I think announcing that is going to give impetus to Pappy to stay together even longer to prevent that, because any one of them can't win. Yeah,
I mean, no, that's
those are the dueling dialogues, right? Like the Imperium is saying, like, blue donut forever. You guys are turning this into Serenity, and Pappy is saying they're going to hunt us down one at a time, so we got to stick together and suppress them and really make sure they have no influence. And you can see those are both correct.
I mean, if Pappy does that, then Goons basically win, though, right? Because they're forcing Pappy to do something that they said they would never do. So
yeah, I presume, and this is a huge presumption, there comes a point where Pappy says, "Okay, they're diminished enough. Let's get off there. Let's go on about our business." The question is there any business to get on with? Like, is there anything to go back to?
You can still
shooting each other.
But you can still start playing the rest of the game.
Irrelevant.
You can still hold the siege and start aggressing each other outside of Delve proper, right?
I think someone pointed out too that the Pappy's current space that they control is more than what the biggest alliance on Serenity controlled at their peak. In terms of like the actual land mass.
The whole Serenity argument to me is puzzling too, because
this has a lot more alliances than Serenity did, I believe. Serenity was one entity.
Does that make it worse though?
I don't know. I think that's diplomacy. There's a lot of fracture points, right? So it's not quite as bad. But if the Imperium win, do they seek revenge and wipe everybody out that attacked them and then consolidate all that power?
Well, TQ can never turn into Serenity. It's
impossible.
It's a false comparison because the way that the TQ players play is so different, and it's never going to get that stale. And it hasn't, right? It's just that it's an agreement to get rid of the Chip King from the board. As soon as the Chip King is weakened enough, it will go back to old school drama shenanigans, and people will start fighting again, right? AOM and Fraternity is already fighting, just not in Dell.
All right, last point. Razek says it's already Serenity 2.0. I consider that just a mocking point, because if this is Serenity 2.0, it's pretty exciting, because I think this war has been pretty exciting, and it's more exciting now than it has been. Plus, you have a ton of stuff happening. It's not even nullsec related. So if this is Serenity 2.0, and I don't think it is, it looks a lot different than Serenity 0.1. All right. Thanks. We'll continue to debate this throughout the week. Check us out on Talking in Stations, YouTube. And any last thoughts, you guys? We're not going to have time because we're way over time for any you may not know section this time, but maybe next time. But last thoughts or shout outs or anybody you want to say hello to?
Next weekend is Eurovision final, and we're going to have drinking sessions and react to.
Oh. All right, Tonya, Arcia, you had your chance. All right. Thanks.
What, you want us to do shout-outs?
Oh, yeah, if you have any.
Sorry, I was waiting for Caleb. I didn't know you were waiting for him. Yeah, I guess my shout-out is I'm running for the CSM. There's a ton of other people running for the CSM too, so you should check them out, including Arcia.
I guess my shout-out is that I'm running for the CSM. So there's also a bunch of other people running for the CSM, like Sutonia.
You guys should run as a ticket.
We should just make a special. All the people in TIS that's running for CSM can have a chit-chat fireside thing.
Should we do a ballot? Should we do a TIS ballot and ballot trade?
Isn't there more than 10
just
people?
Give them a show.
No, we'll do a whole show with just our people that are running. Not our people, because they're not running for us or with us or anything. It's just people that are good at this game and experienced.
Have fun.
Yeah. Let's do. We'll negotiate with everybody, including Imperium, and say, if you put these people on your ballot, that doesn't work. By the way, it only works with one person.
So for people who don't know how the CSM ballot works, you have every one of your accounts can vote. You have a ranked choice voting system. So you pick multiple people, and the order matters. So you pick the candidate you like the best at number 1, and second best at number 2. And you can put up to 10 people on the ballot or something like that.
Yeah, you can put 10.
Yeah. So you should put 10 people on your ballot if you can. Put as many people on the ballot as you can. And the way it works is as people no longer need votes to get in, or as people lose all path to victory, the votes drop down to if your first person can't win, your vote goes to your second person, who maybe they can win. And then if they can't, or they have way too many votes that they don't need, it goes to your third person. So you can put us all on your ballot and put us in the order you like. So if you think Sutonia's Kestrel is better than my Harbinger, so you put Sutonia first and then me second, or whatever. And yeah.
Hey, they can fight it out, right? If we do
I see Arcia's already given up on the Tormentor.
No, I'll fight you with a Tormentor. That was the old meme.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Again, Arcia, CSM, Sutonia, CSM. We have other people running for CSM too, but these guys are amazing. That's why we present them to you every Sunday. Okay, everyone, thanks for coming out, and thanks for sticking with us for a long show. That was CCP earlier today, with thanks to CCP Paradox and CCP Emerald, and of course CCP Swift, who all talked with me earlier in the week. We presented that earlier today. And thanks Arcia, Sutonia, and Caleb for being here today, along with McLeod, who's been engineering. And thank you guys for tuning in today. Remember to join TIS Discord. That's talkinginstations.com/Discord. And go and watch stuff on YouTube if you want for past shows. We'd had some big long shows like this one, and that is youtube.com/talkinginstations. And hello, Paradox out there. Thanks very much. Great interview with you the other day. You and your colleagues had a lot of fun with that. Okay, everybody. Thanks. That's all for us today. We will see you next week on the Weekend Report for Talking in Stations.